I'm Kathryn from the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore and the Sewing Studio at Lady Lake. Today we're going to talk about the BabyLock Vesta, and I know you're going to love it. All right, let's get started. I want to start by highlighting just a few of the features that make this particular machine such an awesome fit for you. Okay, so first of all, there are 301 sewing patterns, and they're easily visible right here in the lid of the screen. That means you're not just doing functional stuff, but you actually get to do some pretty stuff as well, which is excellent. There's also 293 built-in embroidery patterns, which makes it perfect for doing lettering and monogramming and clothing and quilting and all kinds of other designs that are right there built into the machine. You have a 6x10 embroidery field, which means a maximum of 6 inches left to right and 10 inches top to bottom, which is perfect for almost everything. You can do things like I can do shirts for my husband. He's 6 foot tall, so the 10 inches is good for him. And I can also do monogramming on towels. If we take the 10 inches left to right, it's just the perfect size for doing all kinds of things like that. You also have 8 and almost a half inches here in the bed of the machine. So there's quite a bit of space here for you to maneuver when you're doing your sewing and your quilting as well. It's a wonderful, wonderful mid-range size there. There are multi-directional feed dogs with this machine, which means when you're doing your sewing, that the feed dogs can also move left and right as well as front and back, which allows some of your decorative stitches to be almost 1 5/8 across in width. So it really does give you a wonderful variety of stitch patterns to create just even on your sewing side. There are 13 included feet. There's a huge range there that allows you to not just do your straight stitching, but to have an open toe foot so you can see the stitches that are forming. There's a Teflon foot so you can do vinyl. So there's a wonderful number of feet that come with this machine. This machine is also Wi-Fi enabled, which means you can send your designs straight into the screen of your machine from your computer, which is wonderful. If you can't find your USB, you can send it over directly. There's also a lift and pivot function, which allows you to, when you're sewing, if you're going to turn a corner, it'll raise the foot for you when you raise your foot. So that lift and pivot feature is wonderful when you're doing curves and corners and things like that. It really allows you to keep your hands on your project so that you can keep everything maneuvering and moving the way that you want it to. Wonderful, wonderful features. Just to give you a quick little sum up of this awesome machine. Let's take a moment to go over all the stuff you're going to find in your box when you open it up. Just a general overview of all of these accessories, okay? All right, so first of all, you have a soft cover with your machine, which is wonderful to keep the dust off of it. You're going to have 3 different manuals here. You're going to have a quick reference guide, you'll have an operation manual, and you'll have an embroidery design guide. So those 3 things are going to help keep you on track. For embroidery, you've got your 5x7 hoop, as well as the positioning grid. You've got your 6x10 hoop as well as its positioning grid. Okay, for sewing, we've got your, right here, you've got your knee lift. This is your auxiliary spool pin, which you need when you're doing twin needle sewing. All right, you've got a cleaning brush as well as a stylus. You've got a couple of different screwdrivers. You've got your awl and also your little mini screwdriver. Here you've got your seam ripper, which is, of course, everybody's best friend, and an optional little pair of scissors, which is wonderful. All right, there's going to be a couple things of needles, including your twin needle and a variety pack. You've got 2 different bobbin covers. You've got a blank bobbin cover and a 1/4 inch bobbin cover, which is on the machine. This is a little bobbin lifter. If you buy L-class bobbins that are pre-wound, this will help lift those up so that they are the proper size for your machine. You don't want your bobbin bouncing around in there. These are your bobbins, which are class 15 bobbins. So you don't need that when you're using the right size bobbins for your machine. All right, let's go over some of the spool caps. This is a little mini spool cap, which you'll need for embroidery if you're using certain spools that have a kind of tiny little angle at the top, and I'll go over that when we get to embroidery. You have 1 small spool cap, 2 medium spool caps, and 1 large spool spool cap. Make sure you're using the right size spool cap for the size of thread that you've chosen. All right, your J foot is your standard utility presser foot. Your N foot is your monogramming or decorative sewing foot. You've got your G foot, which is your overcasting foot, your R foot, which is your blind hem foot, your I foot, which is your zipper foot, your M foot, which is your button fitting foot, and your A foot, which is your buttonhole foot. So this one makes the buttonhole. Then you've got some extra feet down here as well, which are just fantastic. You've got your open toe quilting free motion foot. You have your open toe foot. This is an adjustable zipper piping foot. This is your Teflon foot for doing corks and vinyls and things like that that are sticky. This is the stitch guide alignment foot. And this little foot is your embroidery foot. And you also have a little accessory tray, which is going to go in your accessory bin to help hold most of your sewing feet for you. You're going to get a little pouch, which you can also store some of your extra feet in, as well as your foot pedal, power cord, and all the other things you're going to need to make things happen perfectly for you. All right, now that we've gone over accessories, let's get started with the machine. To install the power cord, you're going to see that your cord has a flat side and a rounded side. So you're going to match that up on your machine with the rounded side towards the front and the flat towards the back, and you'll just go ahead and install your power cord. Your foot pedal has the tiny little prong, which is going to go into this port right here. So you'll just plug that in, and now your foot pedal is ready to sew. When you're doing twin needle sewing, you're going to need your auxiliary spool pin. So this part right here is going to set directly up on where you wind your bobbin. So it just sets right down, and you're going to aim it in the direction that you're going to be having your thread go. To install your knee lift, you're going to make note of the fact that you've got like little wings on either end of the rod. So those wings are going to insert right into the port. So the knee lift just installs directly in like that, with the wings kind of aiming north and south. In order to install and uninstall and remove your accessory bin, you're just going to place your hand right here under the accessory bin and simply pull out. And when you want to install it, you're going to install it right back on. Now, also at the back of the machine here, that's where we have our feed dogs. To raise and lower our feed dogs, we need to make sure our accessory bin is off of the machine. On the back side of the machine, on the back side of your free arm here, this is where your feed dogs are raised. That's going to be indicated by the little arrows above the line. When you want to drop your feed dogs, simply flip the switch over to where you've got the little arrows underneath the line. So the feed dogs are dropped on this side, and they're raised and working on this side. I want to point out one more cool thing about this accessory bin. It actually has a little stash area on the back as well as the front. So to open up these little trays, you can grab a hold of it here in the back, and that's got a little tray back in here for your bobbins and such. And then in the front, you've got a little tab on the side and the front of it, so it just opens that way so you have access to your sewing feet. Okay, let's deal with winding a bobbin and threading the machine. So in order to install the bobbin, you're going to simply place the bobbin on top of the bobbin winder, and then you're going to spin the bobbin to the right until you hear a little click. What happens is there's a little wire back here on the back of the bobbin winder, and it's going to align itself with a little tab that's cut into the bobbin. That way it holds it nice and secure for you. Okay, to put the thread on the machine, they recommend that we have the thread coming off the bottom of the spool. So you're going to lift up your spool pin and install your thread. Again, it's very important to match the size of spool cap to the size of spool that you're using. So I'm going to use a medium-sized spool cap for this particular spool. Okay, you've got two sets of lines here. One is for threading your machine, and that's going to be the solid line. And then the dotted line, the second line, is for winding your bobbin, and that's where we're going to start. We're going to start here at number 1. So we're going to simply hook the thread around this little tab right here. Then we need to swing underneath the metal tab and over towards the left. Now we've got it hooked under here. we're going to come straight up, and that's where we have the difference between threading the machine where we head towards the left and winding the bobbin where we're going to head over here towards the right. So at this point, I'm going to switch hands, holding my thread with my right hand, and I'm going to take my left hand and simply hold on to the thread right there, just so that it's not loosey-goosey. Okay, here we have where we're going to install the pre-tension on our thread for the bobbin. So we're going to come with our thread and we're going to bring it from the back here towards the front, in between this disc and this metal rail. So I'm starting here at the back and I'm going to bring it straight down in between the rail and this disc. Then I'm going to swing over towards the right. So our thread kind of is aimed around 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, around underneath this disc. Okay, give yourself a little bit of excess thread because we're going to start over here at our bobbin and we're going to wind around 6 or 7 times so that we can get our thread started on our bobbin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, at this point, I need to cut my excess tail, and the bobbin is going to be pinching and holding and cutting our thread right here where there's this little cutout on our bobbin holder. So you're going to swing that thread into that little section of cutout and then pull your thread to the right, and it's going to cut, pinch, and hold that little bobbin tail. The last thing we need to do here is to take this little bobbin winder and move it over to the right. It's going to tuck the bobbin up against this little part right here, which keeps us evenly wound. And we're just going to hit start in order to wind our bobbin. At any point in time, you can touch stop if you've got the desired amount of bobbin thread on your bobbin, or you can just let it go and it'll wind until it's full. Once it's full, it'll kind of like hiccup, it'll and then you'll know it's full. Reach down and go ahead and touch your stop button. To remove your bobbin once you're done, you're going to disengage the bobbin winder, so you're going to push it to the left. You're going to lift it up off of the post, and you know what? That cutter is right there. So I usually just take my thread and I bring it into that little space and I use the cutter so that I've got my bobbin. So in order to thread the machine, make sure your presser foot is up so that the tension discs are open and ready to receive your thread. You're going to start by following the solid lines this time to thread the machine. So we're going to start by coming around here at the back for number 1. Once you're there, we're going to swing the thread underneath the metal hook and towards the left side, and then you turn back up. Now that we're here, we're going to head to the left this time in order to keep heading towards our needle. So we're going to bring the thread around there towards the back. Now we're going to bring it straight down here. Here you can see at the bottom there's a little U-turn sign with the number 3. So that's where we're going to swing underneath towards the left. Now we're going to head right back up towards number 4. When we come up to number 4, we're going to start on the right side and make sure that we swing around at the back of number 4 around to the left side. And now that we've swung around, we're going to bring it right back down. That allows it to catch the hook that's here in the machine. So we're going to bring the thread right back down again, and we're going to come here to number 6. At number 6, you'll notice that there's your needle bar, and on top of your needle bar, there's a little piece of metal. This is a bit like flossing your teeth. You need to get the thread in there past that little piece of metal. So you're going to bring your thread from the right side to the left and hook it in there. While I'm right here, let me just take a second to point this out to you. Here at number 6, you can see the needle above the little thread guide bar. There's that little dot right there, and that little dot is the stopping point for the needle. And that's the needle right there that is touching that little dot. So you can see that the needle is inserted all the way. Okay, so now that we're there at number 6, we're going to kind of pass through here and up over to number 7. Once we're there, here on the side, we're going to cut our excess thread at number 8. I like to put my foot down, so I've got a little extra clearance here for the needle threader to do its job. And then here on the side of the machine, we're going to push down the threading lever. In order to remove your needle, you're going to go ahead and turn towards the front of the machine. Make sure you're holding onto your needle so that it doesn't fall down into the machine. And just turn your screwdriver. To install your needle, make sure the flat side of the needle is facing the back of the machine. And you're going to come right here under the number 6 and simply push your needle straight up. You could use a needle inserter tool, whatever works for you. And now this time we're going to turn our screw towards the back of the machine to tighten it up. In order to install the bobbin, we're going to start by pulling this little tab towards the right as indicated by the arrow. That's going to pop up the bobbin cover. So go ahead and set that aside for now. And now we're going to put the bobbin in here. When you put the bobbin in, you're going to want to put your bobbin in with the thread coming off the left side of your bobbin. It ends up being counterclockwise, and it kind of looks like the letter P for perfect. So we're going to simply lift it up and set it right down in there. Now at this point, I like to hold my bobbin with my right hand. That will prevent it from spinning, and it'll help me get good tension on my thread as I swing it underneath the bobbin area. So if this is the back of the needle plate area is noon, and this is 6 o'clock here at the front towards your body, 7 o'clock is where the tension disc lives underneath this little plastic arm. So we want to make sure we swing through that 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock area with good tension. So keep your hand there and taut, swing your thread around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. And now we know that we've gotten in the tension area properly. So at this point, you're going to swing up and around that little mountain. There's a razor blade there at the end. So just pull your thread against that razor and it's going to cut any of your excess thread. You're going to reinstall your bobbin cover now, and to do that, you're going to take the little tab on the left-hand side and you're going to insert it under the little metal tab on the left-hand side. So it goes underneath there, and once you've pushed it in, you're going to push the bobbin cover down and snap it right into place. I'd like to review the buttons here on the face of the machine, what they mean and how we use them. So we're going to start with this start-stop button. So you can sew without your presser foot plugged in. You can use this start and stop button to start sewing and stop sewing. Right now I have not selected a stitch, so this light is red, indicating stop, I'm not ready to do anything. If we put our presser foot down and we select a stitch, now that light has turned green, which means go, I'm ready to go. So if I touch start, it's ready to go. When we're winding the bobbin, that light actually turns yellow because that indicates that we're winding the bobbin. Okay, next we have our reverse button. If we hold down the reverse button, it will continue to reverse until we let go. If we simply tap that reverse button, it will take one stitch backwards in reverse. This is our locking button or the reinforcement button. This is what quilters prefer in terms of the fact that it'll lock in place before it starts to sew or lock in place as it ends the stitch. This also has a little green light that will appear when we're doing decorative stitching, and it will complete a decorative stitch for us. And I'll go into that in more detail when we get to that function. This is where we can raise and lower the needle. So wherever the needle is, when we touch this button, it'll go to the other place. Right now, my needle is up. If I touch this button, it'll go down. If the needle was down and I touch it, it goes back up. This is our cut function. You always want to cut with fabric under your presser foot. You're not ever going to want to cut on air. So when we touch this button, it's going to pull the threads down underneath and it'll cut. There's a little razor that shoots out and it cuts that thread for us. It's awesome. I love that. This is our presser foot lifter button, so we can raise and lower our presser foot lifter here instead of having to reach in and use our lever. Now, if we've let the machine take control and lift the foot up, when we reach back to put our presser foot down, it doesn't let us have control because we used this button to take control to lift the foot up. So if we want to raise and lower manually, you need to do that from the presser foot down position. This is our speed control when you don't have your presser foot in. So if I have this on slow and I touch my start button, it's going to sew nice and slow for me, or medium or fast. It's a sliding scale. Now, if I do have my presser foot plugged in, this now acts like a jockey. He kind of holds the reins on my foot to keep me going out of control fast. Or like when my daughter was little, I'd put it on slow and ask her to step on the foot for me, and it would still sew nice and slow for me. So this kind of acts like a governing feature for the speed when we do have our foot pedal plugged in. The third thing that this does is width control, and that's where we can move the needle with our speed, and I'll show you that later in detail. Now I'm going to move on to the buttons that are here on the faceplate of the machine. So starting in the bottom right-hand corner, we have a question mark in front of a machine. This is our help button. So when we select this button, it's going to answer our questions. There's 2 pages here of basic operational things. So this one will show you how to thread the machine. This shows you how to wind the bobbin. If I select that, I've got 15 pages that are kind of like animated pages that show me how to wind the bobbin. Down here, if I want to get to page 2, I'm going to select this arrow that's facing the right. So when I select that, it takes me to page 2. If I want to see page 1 again to remind myself what I'm doing, I would touch the left facing arrow, and that takes me back to page 1. If I want to return out of this bobbin winding screen, I'm going to use my little U-turn button, and that returns me to the previous page. So again, I have these first 6 options: threading the machine, winding the bobbin, putting the bobbin in, inserting the needle, installing your embroidery arm, installing a hoop. Page 2, we have putting the embroidery foot on and putting your regular sewing presser feet on. Again, this returns me to the previous screen, which is our home screen for sewing. So let me jump from here over to the far left side. This is our home screen for sewing. So when we've selected this icon, it takes us to the grouped settings for our stitches. So if I want to go into my utility stitches, I've got 6 pages of utility stitches. I can return out of there, and I can select the next one, which takes us into some decorative and some heirloom. So I've got 4 pages there, etc. So each of these little kind of folders, tabs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they take us into various grouped like stitches for us to access what we're doing, and that's from the home screen on sewing. On the embroidery home screen, when I select that, this takes me to the same kind of a page where my like designs are going to be grouped together in like buttons. So my fonts are going to all be down here in my normal font tab. My designs are going to be over here in my design tab, etc. So home screen for sewing, home screen for embroidery. We've already talked about this. This is our return to the previous screen button. And let me go back here to sewing. This right here is going to be a kind of like a needle exchange key. It's a locking key. It's a safety feature. So when I select this button, it asks me, can I lower my presser foot? Our response is going to be okay, because what it's done now is lowered our presser foot so that we can safely change the needle. And by safely, I mean that engaging that button will not let us start, stop, reverse, needle up, needle down, lift the foot, anything on speed, any of these buttons, none of them are going to work because everything is locked up for us to safely change that needle. When we're done changing the needle, we'll press that button again, and now it reactivates every one of our buttons. So if I want to raise or lower my foot, of course, now I can. So the next set of buttons we've talked about where I can turn my page to the left or to the right. So if I was here in my utility stitches, this is the first 6 utility stitches. In order to access 7, 8, and 9, I'm going to touch to the right, and there I have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. If I want to go back to the previous screen, I'm going to touch my left arrow. That takes me back to the previous page. And actually from here, I can also touch it again and go back to the last number of stitches that are here in my utility stitches. So this does like a wraparound, like a clock. It can go off to the right and also off to the left. Lastly, here we have our utility menu. So this menu actually is our operational settings for the machine. When we come in here, this is where we can customize how the machine is operating for the various things that we're going to be doing. And I'll go into this in detail later on in the lesson. We're starting to get to the good stuff. Let's talk about selecting our stitches. So first of all, inside the lid here of the BabyLock Vesta, all your stitches are displayed so that you can easily figure out which one you want to choose to do whatever treatment you're going to be doing. All right, so I can look here in the lid, and if I want to do a straight stitch, I know that I'm going to choose one of these. So these stitches that are pictured here on the left are all found in tab 1, our basic utility stitches. So if I want to do a straight stitch center needle position with a reverse, which is stitch number 03, I'm going to come to tab 1, and right there I'm at stitch 1-03, straight stitch center needle with a reverse. All right, let's say I wanted to do something decorative like this satin stitch S over here. I need to go to tab number 6 to get to stitch number 32. So how do I get to tab 6? Here I am inside of tab number 11111. So I'm going to go to my home screen for sewing. And once I've done that, I can see my tab 6. And I need to get to stitch number 32. So I'm going to go to the right, turn my pages to the right until I can see stitch number 32. And I will simply select it and it shows up there and I've got my stitch chosen. So again, all of the information in each of these sectioned areas are found in that particular tab that's indicated in the top left-hand corner of each of these little viewing areas. From your home screen, you can access all of them. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the reverse versus the reinforce, reversing versus reinforcing, and how we access those functions, as well as how we can automatically do it versus manually doing it ourselves. So I've started off by selecting stitch number 1-01, which is a left needle position with a reverse. So I'm going to come over here and go ahead and touch start. And then I'm going to let it stitch a couple of stitches and then touch stop. Again, if I tap my reverse button, it does one stitch backward. If I hold it, it continues to reverse for me. Then I'm going to select start again. When I get to the end of where I want to sew, I'm going to go ahead and touch stop. Hold down my reverse button to do a few reversing stitches. Start and stop. All right, so I've stopped with the needle in the down position, which is a setting I've made on my machine. So I'm going to go ahead and select my cut function, and I'm going to raise my presser foot. So there we have reversing stitches at the start and at the end of what our seam is doing. Now this is where we have performed all of those functions manually, but this machine does so much more for us. So let's continue to see what the machine can work for Mama. Okay, so now instead of doing everything myself, I'm going to go ahead and select this little reverse button right here. So when I select that on screen, that's my manual reversing because I've chosen a stitch with the reverse. When I select start, it's going to come forward a few stitches, automatically reverses for us, and then continues forward. When I'm done, I can simply tap my reverse button. It automatically reverses the appropriate amount of stitches and stops with the needle in the down position. Again, I'm going to cut and lift my presser foot. So the machine has done some of the work for us, but it gets better than that. So if I select my cut function, Now it's going to automatically do both of these things for me. So let me just review this. If I select reverse, just on its own, it'll automatically reverse for us. If I start by selecting my scissors, it highlights both of them, selecting both of them, and now it's going to reverse and cut for me. So when I select start, it's going to come forward a few stitches. It automatically reversed for me. When I get to the end of what I want to do, I'm going to simply tap my reverse button, and this time it reverses and cuts so that all I have to do is lift my foot and my fabric comes free. Better yet, there's even one more function. This machine comes with a lift and pivot. So when I select this, it's also going to lift up the foot for me at the end of the seam. So I'm going to select start. It's going to come forward. The machine automatically reverses the appropriate amount of stitches. When I get to the end of what I want to do, I tap my reverse button. It reverses, comes back forward, cuts, and lifts. So it's done all of my work for me, which is wonderful. Now, what's the difference between reversing and reinforcing? So we've seen these reversing stitches where the machine has done 3 or 4 stitches. Quilters don't like this, however, because it creates a bit of bulk at the start and end of their seams. So instead of doing this, they like to choose the reinforce stitch, which is going to stitch in place for us. So let's see what that looks like. It's like start, and you can see the needle staying in place and doing a few stitches. And when I get to the end, I'm going to tap my reinforcement key instead of my reverse key. And now it has done that locking stitch for me where it performs a little knot right there so that it just locks in place, does not create any bulk. And again, that's much preferred by quilters. I'd like to go into a little bit more detail about the lift and pivot function. So the lift and pivot function is wonderful because when you get to the end of the seam, it will automatically lift up your foot for you. Now, it also works within a seam. So if you plug in your presser foot for your foot pedal, what it actually does when you have that turned on and engaged and it's blue, what it does is it marries your foot to this presser foot here on the machine. So when your foot goes down, this foot goes down as well. When your foot comes up, this foot comes up. It makes it ideal for curves. So let's see what that looks like. I've got my fabric here and I'm going to do a little bit of a curve around here. So I'm going to start by putting my foot down. Now, when I come to a place where I want to do a curve, I simply take my foot off of the foot pedal, and now this foot has raised as well. I can put my foot back down. That allows me, what it's doing is allowing me to move my fabric instead of fighting my feed dogs. So I can curve my fabric, put my foot down, that foot goes down, I lift my foot up, that foot comes up. Now you're able to manage your curves as opposed to what we used to do, which was, oh, I'm going around a curve, so I'm going to fight my feed dogs. No, by engaging your lift and pivot function, you can actually just do it one stitch at a time if you need to. Perfect for applique, for setting in sleeves. It really just does a wonderful job of lifting that foot for you so that you can better manage your fabric. I'd like to go over how to make basic changes to your stitch settings. Maybe you want to baste something, so you want to have a longer stitch length. Maybe you want to have a wider zigzag. So how do we do that? All right, let's look at our screen here. Across the top of the screen, you have several settings that are displayed with a black background and white numbers. So the black background, white numbers, these are your default settings. The machine has built-in intelligence. When you pick a stitch, your automatic settings are there in default. You don't have to know, I'm doing a triple stitch, therefore I need to have my width at 0, my length. No, the machine's already going to set that for you. But sometimes we want to make changes to those basic settings. So I've got my width setting, my length setting. LR shift is actually where you can shift your needle left or right. And then also there are tension adjustments, although I rarely ever do that. So if I want to move my needle, I'm here on this straight stitch left needle position. I can do that by modifying my width. Well, when I select that, nothing's happening because all of these settings are changed and modified within this button right here. So I can go in there and now I can make changes. When I do my width setting here and I touch my plus button, it's actually moving my needle towards the right because I'm on a straight stitch. And you can see there is black numbers, white background. This is me in control versus the black background, white numbers, which is the default settings, the in knowledge machine that it has for you. Length is here. To lengthen it, you're going to touch your plus button. To shorten it, you're going to touch your minus button. Again, with the straight stitch on my left, right shift, I can move my stitch to the right or to the left. And I can find that to do that way. Or another quick reset button. If I've shifted it over but decided, oh, I don't want to do that, I want to go back to my default settings. Right here, we have this little couple of lines inside a box. When I touch that, it quickly resets to its natural built-in default settings. All right, let's look at a zigzag for a moment. So I'm going to go to the next page and choose a zigzag. So if I want to modify my width on a zigzag, I'm going to do that here in the stitch setting button. I can come to my width and increase my width. And one of the cool things about the Vesta is you can actually see that happening on screen. This is actually showing me that I've got 100% realistic rendering of what that stitch width looks like. So if I want to go back to my default settings, the fastest way to do it again is to touch this button here, the two lines inside the box, and it goes right back to the default. And again, I'm looking at this in the way that it's actually going to appear on my fabric, 100% realistic rendering. If I want to change my tension, I can do that here. Again, I can just plus to increase or minus to decrease. Although again, I almost never ever do that. All right, if I want to save a setting for myself, let's say I'm a paper piecer and I want to do a stitch length at 1.2. Paper piecers like to have short stitch length because it really perforates the paper and they can tear it off more easily. If I'm always going to do this stitch this way, right here where we have the red arrow going into the machine, pointing at the needle, when I select that, it's going to save this particular setting as the default setting for this stitch. So I'm going to say okay to get out of here, and that's stitch number 2. So let's say I'm sewing in center and now it's time for me to paper piece again. When I select that stitch, it comes up at my saved setting, my customized setting, which is wonderful. Earlier, several months ago, I decided I needed glasses, but building up to that, I was changing my stitch length. Instead of the 2.5 default, I was sewing at a 3.0 because it was easier for me to see to rip out. So I can touch that saving button, and now every time I select that stitch, it comes up on my preferred setting, my default setting. So if I want to put this back to default and I don't want it to remember my setting anymore, again, this is our reset button, but I would need to overwrite that by touching that button one more time so that now when I come back to stitch number 2, it's on all of the black background. That's all of my default settings. All right, I'm just going to talk about some of the settings we've got down here on the bottom of the screen now. So first of all, this is one of the ones we haven't talked about yet. This is just where it allows you to see a realistic rendering of your stitch. So right now I've chosen this lightning stitch, stitch number 1-06, and I can see it there on the screen at a 100% realistic rendering, but I can't really see it. I don't know what it actually looks like because it's just not easy to see on the screen. So down here, if I select this, it comes up at a realistic rendering, and I can see that again by the 100%. But if I touch my plus magnify button, now I've zoomed in on it and I can get a better look at what it actually looks like on the fabric. So the lightning stitch is something you would choose if you were maybe hemming a knit. It's going to give you as straight a zigzag stitch as possible to allow that hem to happen. So now I can see that. Another thing you've got down here at the bottom, if you can't see blue very well, some of my customers have macular degeneration. This lets you choose to see it in red or black or blue. So whatever works for you, it just helps you see that depicted more clearly. Okay, we'll get us out of there. All right, I'd like to talk about this button here. This is more stitch settings, and it's actually easier to put this into example with some of our more decorative stitches. So I'm going to select my home screen for sewing, which allows me to come back to this menu. One of the ones I'd like to talk about is here in section 6. So when I select that, it brings me into some of our bigger decorative, prettier stitches. And I'm going to start by selecting stitch number 620. So I'm going to come here to the right. And there I have stitch 620. This is a candle wicking stitch. It's named that because it's supposed to look like the splat of wax that happens. So candle wicking stitches. They're big, nice decorative stitches. They're traditionally used in heirloom. So again, here I have this stitch setting key right here. When I come in there, more options come up for me. And one of my favorite things to do is a single versus continuous rendering of this particular stitch. So when I select this right here, you can see I have one candle wicking stitch. I've got a single version of it versus sewing it continuously or many guys. And again, that is also available here if I was to choose that stitch setting. Now I literally have one stitch, single versus continuous. Okay, so I'm going to show you another one here. If I can get to my blanket stitching, which is in tab 2, stitch number 3, stitch setting key. All right, so right now, another thing I want to show you is the mirror imaging or flipping of the stitch. So right now, if I'm doing blanket stitching, you can see I've got the line here and it's like a rake where the tines reach over and grab into the fabric. But depending on how I need to position my piece, I might need to flip that or mirror image it so that the line is on the left side and the tines are reaching over towards the right. So that's a wonderful key right there, the flipping key. So again, you've seen single versus continuous, and you can also see mirror imaging, which allows you to flip your stitch. Another setting that's in here is this one right here. All right, so let me go back to a straight stitch to show you that. So when I'm here in a straight stitch with a lock, with a reverse, I can come into more settings, and this is my free motion stitch. So when I select that, it actually drops my feed dogs for me, allowing me to do free motion quilting. It immediately shows up as an open toe free motion quilting foot as well. So I'm going to deselect that, and you can see I'm back on my J foot, which is my normal standard utility zigzag foot. But when I select my free motion button, it drops the feed dogs and indicates that I need to put on my open toe free motion quilting foot. So that if you're going to be doing stippling, that's where you want to go. It's going to drop your feed dogs and remind you which foot to put on. Last but not least, here in this utility key is this one right here. And that one is a stitch refresh key. So this is actually going to be better indicated over in decorative stitches when I start to talk about those. Basically what it does is if I've completed row 1 of stitching and I need to start at the beginning of the pattern for row 2, I would touch that. There's just a beep that happens. Nothing changes on screen, but it brings me to the beginning of the stitch. And I'll show you an example of that when we do our decorative stitching. So that's it for the stitch settings key here in the utility section of the machine. All right, let's talk about what we can see here on the left side of the screen. So first of all, I've got a little arrow pointing down and my needle is down underneath my fabric. This is showing me that I have the machine set up right now to stop with the needle in the down position. I had a straight stitch selected, so it's telling me I need to have my J foot on for that stitch that I've selected. Now over here on the right, this number 1-16, this is an overcasting stitch. It helps me seal the edges to keep my things from fraying. So when I select that one, now it's telling me I need a G foot, which is my overcasting foot. And I'll go into that in more detail. But it's really cool that it indicates what stitch I need to have on depending on what stitch I've chosen. Let's say I'm going to do a decorative stitch. Now it wants me to use my end foot. Let's say I want to do a buttonhole. Now I need my A foot. So keep an eye there in the top left-hand corner and make sure that you're using the foot that it's asking you to use. I've selected a decorative stitch, so now I need to switch from my J foot to my N foot. How do we change our feet off of our machine? Let's see how. So first of all, I've got my J foot attached here. At the back of the machine, there's a little black lever which you need to squeeze towards the front. And when you do that, your presser foot just drops right off. So now to put on the new foot, the one that the machine's telling me to put on, I'm going to slide my foot underneath here. There is a bar, which I'm going to go ahead and just clamp right down. I'll place my foot down. And it snatches right onto the foot. So again, I'm going to squeeze front to drop it off. And then to reattach it, I'm just going to clamp right down on that bar. All right, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about this reinforced key and then also this little green light here that's going to come up. When we choose a decorative stitch, this reinforcement key will complete that particular stitch for us. Instead of cutting it off right when we're done with where we want to stop, it will finish up that stitch pattern. So I've chosen stitch number 634. I'm going to go ahead and select start so you can watch what happens. It starts to sew the pattern for me, which is this really pretty little S. It's kind of a triple stitch, a nice, thick, decorative, beautiful stitch. Now, if I just want one of these and I want it to complete, so it's a full S, I'm going to touch my reinforcement key. See that green light just came on? And what it's going to do is finish that stitch for me and stop. Okay, I'm going to cut and lift my foot. And as you can see, it has completed that stitch. I have one full motif. It didn't just stop dead like right there or wherever I touched my reverse button. Here in section 7, we have our satin decorative stitches. One of the things that I want to demonstrate here is stitch number 10. Section 7, these satin stitches, if you come into more settings, which is this key down here, in the decorative settings, we have a less dense and a more dense version that we're able to choose for this stitch. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to select one of these at the default setting, which is less dense. And then I'm going to go ahead and select another one of them. And we're going to do the second one in the dense version. All right, let's stitch that and see what it looks like. Okay, so let's look at these two. We can clearly see a difference between the first one and the second one, the less dense and the more dense version. So this gives you the option if you're working on a lighter weight fabric and you don't have the strength to hold a lot of stitches, you could choose your less dense version versus sewing something on canvas or denim, or you might want to choose the more dense version. All right, let's go into more detail about the single versus continuous. I've chosen stitch number 620, and I'm going to come in here to more settings. When I do that, I'm going to choose one of these little candle wicking stitches. One of the coolest things is that you can customize and create your own stitch path using single stitches of a variety of stitches. So I've chosen that one single candle wicking stitch. And I'm going to return out of here and choose another decorative stitch to combine it with. One of the things I like to do is 626. So when I choose that back on settings, now I've chosen one of one and one of another. When I choose continuous, it's going to stitch that for me. Again, here is where I can look at what I've created. So I have one candle wicking stitch and one of this decorative little doily. So I can create my own stitch pattern by combining various stitches. It's really just a very, very cool feature. It allows you to really customize your stitches for whatever project you're doing. When you select OK, it'll get you out of that window and you're back looking at where you are on your sewing screen. Another setting found on this screen here, this extra settings screen, is L and S, which stands for large and small. So on that candle wicking stitch, this is the large version of it. But if I was doing something more delicate or something for a child, maybe I want to choose the small version of it. Not every stitch in this decorative area has a large and small version, but this button will be active if it is. See right here how this button is gray? If this was gray, it would indicate that I don't have that as an option. But for this one, I do. So the next thing that I want to talk about is here in section number 8. These are our satin stitches, and I'm going to choose 8-1 right here. So this machine has a pattern lengthening function, which is so fantastic. One of my customers has Dolly and Me clothes that she makes. So here, if I select this lengthening, I'm able to select 1 for my Dolly clothes or 5 for my little girl clothes. So again, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing a small section versus a large section, you're able to change the length of that particular stitch. Not the stitch length, but the pattern itself. It's a wonderful feature. Finally, in this section, we have a section where we can choose to step our stitch to the left or step it to the right. So we have our first little stitch there, and I can choose to make the next stitch go 1 step to the right. So I'm going to choose that stitch again, and 1 step to the right, and choose that stitch again, and 1 step to the right. So if we look here, you can make it build itself upwards and downwards in a nice large arc. All right, I want to take a look right here where I ended this particular decorative stitch. If I want to start a second row of this same decorative stitch, I don't want to pick up the top of that row where I left off at the end of this row, the first row. So in order to start fresh at the beginning, I'm going to need to go into my More Settings key, and this right here is my Pattern Fresh key. So when I want to start at the beginning of that stitch, I'm simply going to select that button, and now it'll start at the top of the little curve where it's supposed to. So as you can see here at row 2, there it is. It started at the beginning of the stitch motif instead of picking off at the bottom of the stitch where it ended. It starts fresh at the beginning. We're going to go over overcasting. So I've chosen stitch number 116, and it tells me right there on the edge of my screen that I need my G-foot on. This is my G-foot. Your G-foot has this kind of inside rail, and we're going to line our fabric up against that, and then the overcasting stitch is going to happen, which will actually leap out over the edge of our fabric, keeping it sealed and contained. It's almost like a serging stitch, and it's really fantastic for keeping your edges with a professional finish. Okay, so when we're doing our overcasting stitch, again, you're going to want to line your fabric and butt it right up against this inside toe of your foot. And that way the stitches are going to form over this little metal rod that's there within the mouth of the foot. So I'm going to go ahead and get this going. Now let's do a blind hem. This is the R foot. The R foot is our blind hem foot. And the R foot has in the center of it this flange, which is going to allow us to butt our fold up against it. And I've chosen the woven blind hem stitch, which is stitch number 2-01. All right, let's see what that looks like. So there we have our perfect little blind hem stitch, and you can see it's just taken teeny little nips out of that fold, giving you that perfect little blind hem. In order to get a buttonhole that's going to be the perfect size of the button, we need to put the button into the foot first. So you're going to take your thumb and slide that up and then pinch that down on the button there. Now right here, this distance is going to be measured by the machine. So how do we do that? Well, let's look. So I've installed the buttonhole foot onto the machine, the A foot. Now this distance here is the diameter of the button. And this lever here needs to get pulled down in between these two arms on this buttonhole foot so that we have the perfectly sized buttonhole. So simply grasp a hold of your buttonhole lever and pull that straight down in between those two arms. So if we look here at the opening on this buttonhole foot, you've got a couple of markings. Your green and red markings on the left and right side of the foot are your starting and stopping points for where your buttonhole is going to be performed. And right here, this center red notch, this is going to be the center of the buttonhole, which you're going to open up later to receive your button. All right, let's see what this looks like. There we have our perfect buttonhole. When you're done with your buttonhole, you need to be sure and push your buttonhole lever right back up into your machine. So just push it straight up into the machine. Now it's time to sew that button on, and believe it or not, your machine has a foot that can do it. So you're going to install your M foot, and you're going to place your button into that M foot with the holes of the button lining up with the little red marks on the bottom of your foot. You'll notice that this foot also has a little plastic lever, which actually creates a distance so that the stitch forms over that little plastic lever to shank your button. In other words, it's not going to sew the button on so tight against your clothes that you can't even use it as a button. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room between your button and your fabric. One of the things that I like to do before sewing a button on is that I like to make sure that my needle is going to have full clearance. So I turn the hand wheel towards myself, making sure it inserts on the right side. Keep turning it towards myself, making sure it inserts on the left side. I'm clear, so I can go ahead and press start now. Having a background in the theater, I really don't want to lose my buttons, so usually I do this twice. When you're done, make sure you pull your fabric towards yourself. And that releases it right out. You've got your perfect little button sewn on. To install your button, you're going to select stitch number 414. This is going to drop your feed dog so that your fabric doesn't move forward or backward. It just stays in place. And it's going to tack in between the eyes and the holes of your button and get that button installed for you. To install your zipper, we're going to use our I foot. You'll notice that you can actually clip this foot, the I foot, on either side depending on which side of your zipper you need to install. So right now I've got it clipped on the right side of the foot because I'm doing the left side of the zipper. You're going to need to go into your settings and move your needle so that it falls into this hole so that it doesn't actually hit the foot as it's coming down. So make sure that your needle is going to go into the right position. So you're going to line your teeth right up against the edge of your foot so that they actually underneath the foot, there's like a little bridge there, and the teeth can pass underneath that without any trouble. So your fabric is lined up against your teeth are lined up against the foot, your needle is going to drop into the hole, and you're ready to go. Okay, it's time to start talking about the operational settings within the machine. So one of the really cool features about this machine is that you can make changes to how the machine works, depending on the project that you're working on. So if I'm working on something super thick, I might want to increase my presser foot height. If I'm working on something super thin, I might want to decrease my presser foot height. So you have the ability to customize how the machine is working to have perfect sewing, perfect embroidery for whatever you're doing. However, one thing to be aware of is when you make that change, you're telling the machine, look, work like this, you. And the machine's like, okay, we're doing towels today, perfect. But then tomorrow when you go to work on chiffon, the machine still thinks you're doing towels because you told it, work like this. So if you finish with your one project and you've made changes in this settings area, you need to remember to take that machine back to default settings. That way the machine is kind of like at its neutral zone, and then it's able to kind of like handle universal type of stuff. So just be sure it's awesome, but you have to be the boss of it always. You have to tell it what to do because you're the boss of your projects and what you're doing and how you're doing it. Okay, let's jump right in. All right, so I'm going to jump right here into the operational settings key. So when I go in here, it opens up on page 1 of 14 pages of settings. The very first setting is something called width control. If you turn this on, it actually takes this little picture, which is your speed key. What it does is it locks your needle position into where your speed key is indicating. So if I have my speed key all the way over to the left, my needle is now all the way over to the left. And as I start to move my speed key towards the right, my needle is moving to the right. So how is that valuable? Well, you could potentially put your needle in a certain position because the stripe on your fabric, you just need that needle one tink over to the right or one tink over to the left. So you're able to make those changes. Or if you wanted to start on a wide zigzag and make it to a point like a beak on a bird, you are able to, as you are sewing, slowly move your speed control over to the left and you go from a wide zigzag to a point. So these are, again, things that allow you to have control over your needle and how that needle is working. All right, most of the time I do leave mine off though, because I don't make a lot of beaks with the kind of sewing that I'm doing. All right, so the next thing you have is fine adjustments vertical and fine adjustments horizontal. So this is a section that allows you to make changes to how the way your feed dogs are manipulating your fabric. Now, I had a circumstance one time where a decorative stitch that I had chosen wasn't stitching perfectly on my double-sided fusible Fast-to-Fuse and my fabric that I had with it. So I was concerned that it wasn't stitching properly. So I ran back and got the technician because I'm lucky enough to be able to go and do that. And he came out and he's like, you know, you can go right in there and you can make those changes. And I was like, okay. So you can do it without fear because you can always go back and find your default settings. So if I need to, if there's a stitch that's coming to a point, maybe the point is separated. Or if it's coming to a point, maybe one side of the point is higher than the other side and it doesn't come to that perfect point. This is where you can go in and make adjustments up or down to how those feed dogs are manipulating your fabric. And again, that has to do with the kind of fabric or interfacing or stabilizer or all those things that you are working on that you're able to customize it for the perfect stitch. Okay, next you have twin needle. If you turn the twin needle mode on, what it allows you to do is if you're choosing a decorative stitch, it will give you a little sad face and be like, no, you can't do that with that stitch. So it's a safety feature allowing you to only choose stitches that are going to have success when you have a twin needle inserted into your machine. All right, we're going to go on to page 2. So how do I get to page 2? It's not with these little arrows. This is just my page indicator. I'm actually going to go to this arrow to the right. So now I'm on page 2 of 14. Presser foot height. So again, if I need to have my presser foot lift a little bit higher because I'm working on thick fabrics, like when I go to turn a corner or something like that, you're allowed to change your presser foot height. So if I make that change, you can see now I'm with a white background and black letters as opposed to a black background with white numbers. Numbers, not letters. Anyway, that's me in control versus the machine's default settings. So presser foot height is an adjustment you can make, which is really cool. Presser foot pressure. Again, that has to do with if I'm working on chiffon versus upholstery fabric. I'm allowed to increase or decrease my presser foot pressure so that my fabric feeds through my machine a little bit more smoothly or more appropriately. Okay, the next thing we have is the initial position. You can choose center or you can choose left needle. Okay, so for those of us who are of a certain age, we've been sewing long enough to where center needle was always the default position. But nowadays, machines actually come out of the box in left needle position. So someone like me who's been sewing for a long time might say, man, I don't like it in the left needle. I need it in the center. But there's a reason why things do come out left needle now. And that is on the opening where your needle is sewing, you have the ability to move your needle left and right so that you can create pretty decorative stitches. However, back in the day, we only had straight stitch machines. So you had one little hole and the needle went in and out and your fabric was fully supported around that nice little circular hole and the needle. There was nice tight space. You got nice clean stitches. Now you have that opening, which allows for decorative stitches. However, if you sew in the left needle position, now you're getting 3 sides of your fabric supported. That means if I'm doing top stitching or working on something thicker, I've got a better stitch in the left needle because I've got 3 sides of my fabric supported under the needle plate, as opposed to sewing in the center where your fabric could potentially kind of go in with your needle and come out with your needle. That's called flagging. So the stitch might not look as good if you're in center needle position with certain projects. So depending on what you're doing, you might want to set your machine to wake up in left needle as opposed to center. However, if you're a quilter, of course, you're pretty much going to leave it in center needle position. Okay, next page. Pivoting height. This is when you have the lift and pivot function where you can lift your foot and turn your corner and lift your foot and turn your corner. If you're doing something thick, maybe you need to have your pivoting height where the foot raises be a little bit higher, and you can make that adjustment here. Free motion foot height. So if I'm doing regular batting, like a normal batting, I'm going to pretty much leave that alone. However, if I'm doing a high loft batting or 2 layers of batting, I'm able to have that foot height raise. And that's important because you don't want to see smooshing and pushing when your foot's going along and doing your free motion stippling. So if you start to see smooshing and pushing, you can come in and raise your free motion foot height. It's really nice to be able to customize that for yourself. All right, next we have the automatic fabric sensor system. So this is your automatic tension, and pretty much I turn that on and leave it on. I need the machine to, when the foot comes down, that it senses the weight of my fabric and then properly delivers the tension for me. I'd much rather personally leave the machine in control of that than be trying to make all of those adjustments myself. So I leave the automatic fabric sensor system on. All right, next we have reinforcement priority. All right, so I'm going to actually demonstrate this because it takes a little bit of explanation. So I'm going to turn this on and let me show you what that is. So if I look at stitch number 1-02 or 1-04, these are the locking keys or the reinforcing key stitches. And what that means is that they're going to stitch in place and then start to sew. Now, I've never had in my life, as I'm, of a certain age, I've never had this reinforcement key, which is such a wonderful key for quilters so that it'll stitch in place and sew, as opposed to the reversing key, which is coming forward, going backwards, and coming forward, building up stitches. Quilters much prefer to have it lock in place and then sew. You don't get that thickness buildup of the thread throwing off the math of your perfectly cut, blocks or squares or things like that. So my problem is when I choose a reinforcement stitch like 1-04, when I get to the end, my arm traditionally reaches for this reverse key. But I shouldn't be reaching for that key. I should be reaching for this key to lock my stitch. So by turning on the reinforcement priority, what I'm doing is if I accidentally touch reverse when I have chosen a reinforcing stitch, the machine's like, I got you, honey. I'm going to do a reinforce it. I'm not going to reverse. So what it is it's allowing me to not make a mistake at the end. So if I choose a reinforcing stitch, it's going to reinforce. So it doesn't overwrite the stitch that I've chosen. It allows that stitch to be the actual thing, regardless of what my habit of touching happens. So I love that. I would totally turn that on. I need all the help that I can get. So reinforcement priority definitely needs to be turned on. Okay, so let's see what that actually looks like. First of all, I'm going to choose a reinforcement stitch and I'm going to turn that reinforcement priority off. So I've chosen the reinforcing stitch and I'm going to go ahead and set up my automatic reversing and cutting, and let's see what happens. So this time I'm going to touch this button by accident when I really should be touching this at the end. I'm going to touch this one instead because habitually this is where I reach. So I'm going to go ahead and select start. And now I'm going to touch reverse by accident. Okay, so what happened? It actually performed a reverse stitch right there. You've got that buildup of stitches, despite the fact that I chose a reinforcing stitch. So the machine did what I told it to do, despite the fact that I made a mistake. So if I do this and I turn the reinforcement priority on, I'm going to touch this by accident. I should touch this, but I'm going to touch that by accident again. So I'm going to go ahead and select start. And here I touch that at the end. It's locking in place. It's not doing the reversing. So this time the machine did what it was supposed to do. It's got that nice little locking stitch as opposed to the reversing stitch, the buildup of stitches. So thank goodness the machine keeps me in line. I love that feature. Okay, so here on page 4, you have the ability to let the machine help you do some things. For those of us that are like control freaks, we might want to be in control of every little thing that happens every single second of the time. However, the machine is here to help you, and you can set it up so that it will. So first of all, the auto down. This is where when you start to sew, you will I put my foot down and I start to sew. But a lot of people they've got everything situated and they're ready to go. And when they put their foot down, they just want to have the foot go down and start to sew. And actually you can turn that on and the machine will do that for you. That's a wonderful feature. The second thing is the auto up. So with the auto up, it's the end of the story as opposed to the beginning. When I get to the end of my fabric, if I want the machine, when I take my foot up to have the machine automatically lift the presser foot, I can set it up that way by just simply turning that on. So again, it helps you move more efficiently. It's a time saving that you don't have to reach back and lift your foot, that the machine's doing it automatically for you. And the press to trim, for sure, that's one that I think everybody should turn on, in terms of the fact that when you go to cut your thread, you should always do that with fabric under your foot and with your foot down. The tension that's created allows the razor to come out and cut that thread appropriately, so you get a good clean cut on your thread every time. But sometimes I'm moving too quickly. I've gotten to the end, I've raised my presser foot, and then I touch the cut button, and now the razor comes out to cut, and it's wiggly jiggly in there because nothing's holding it tight for the razor to come out and cut the thread. So your presser foot should technically always be down with fabric under your foot when you do that. So by selecting this on, it's a bit of a safety feature that it really allows you to get a clean cut on your threads at the end of your seam. All right, let's go to the next page, page 5. Now we're starting to get into some of the embroidery operational settings. So there's some real good fun stuff in here as well. All right, so with the embroidery frame display, you can set up your viewing area in your editing pane when you're looking at what you're doing and where things are situated within that editing screen. So like a lot of times, like if I'm going to do something small, a 4x4, say a onesie for my neighbor or whatever, I like to see my lines, my parameters, my border, my yard, my fence, so that I don't overbuild. Because if I've gotten my onesie all hooped and perfect and ready to go, and I go into embroidery and I'm beyond my 4x4 zone, then the machine tells me to change to a bigger hoop and I'm like, I didn't realize I needed a bigger hoop. So here's where I can set up where I have a visual boundary for myself to keep me in line. So for instance, right now it's at the 6x10. So if I had a 5x7 hoop, I could choose to see that boundary line right there on my frame display. If I had a different hoop, like a border hoop or a 6x6, if I was building a 6x6 quilt block, this allows you to stay within your boundaries so that you can just keep everything perfect as you're going along and you're set up and ready to go by the time you head towards embroidery. So I like to choose those different hoops so that I set myself up for success. Also, you have the ability to view your editing area in several different ways. You can look at it with a clean space. You can look at it with a red dot in the center for visual sense of putting your things right where they need to be in the center. You can also look at it in a quadrant view. So a quadrant view would be helpful if you had like the word love and you wanted L in the top left, O in the top right, V in the bottom left. So the quadrant view would allow you to position things off of one another in relation to something else in space. It's really quite helpful. Especially the grid is one of my favorites too. If you're doing lettering or poems or that kind of thing, it's very easy to see where you can line your lines up one to another so that you can perfectly space out your lines of lettering. So whatever way works for you, you have the ability to set it up for different projects and absolute perfection in your acuity of where you're placing things. Love that. So first of all, I'm going to start by selecting my smallest hoop. So there, my smallest hoop is on the screen, little 1 by 2.5 inch hoop. So if I select my embroidery frame identification view, if I turn that on, let me show you what happens. When I come in here and I go to select a design, everything is gray. Why is everything gray? Because the machine is telling me none of these are going to fit that smallest hoop. So I need to continue to look for a design that will actually fit in that tiny hoop. So I'm going to select the next page. Nothing there, nothing there. Ah, look. So if I select that one, the machine now tells me that that little design, which is only an inch and 0.14 by 0.74, that design fits in the hoop. And that's the first one after 3 pages of choices that will actually fit in that hoop. So it's setting you up to only pick the designs that are going to work in the hoop that you've chosen. So you can have that on or off. I personally like to leave it off because I like to preview my designs, and if I need a bigger hoop, maybe I'll go for a bigger hoop just because I love that design so much. Okay, so that's up to you and how you want to work. So back to our menu. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that one off. All right, so page 6. Page 6 allows us to have the machine tell us information in 2 different ways. So if I'm the type of person that buys a design because I love a specific designer, and the designer has told me, you better use let's see, Madeira Poly brand thread, which is good because that's one of the ones that we carry. You better use that Madeira Poly brand thread. And if you're doing this design, your first color is color number 1801 and 1703 and 1649. It will tell you the color number so you can go get those specific spools of color thread and use them in that design. So let me show you what that looks like. So again, if I've chosen this little ship, I need to go get Madeira Poly 1838, which is the red that's in the sail. My second color would be Madeira Poly 1893. So again, it's going to give me specific color, not even choices. It's going to dictate to me specific colors to make this design look the way the original author creator of the design intended. However, I'm kind of willful. So I'm the type of person that likes to pick my own colors. So let me show you how that works. You'll go back to your operational menu. And instead of having color number, I'm going to scroll to the right. And now it says name of color. So now it's telling me Foxy Red. Oh, that's the red part. I'm going to do green there. Oh, that's the California blue part. I don't want blues. I'm not a blue person. I'm going to do purple there. So again, I can have it tell me name of color, what color I should use by the name, or I can have it indicate to me a specific color number for a specific brand of thread, and then I can use exactly what the creator wanted me to do. So you can have it speak to you in either way, either by name of color or by color number. I prefer name of color myself. Okay, maximum embroidery speed. All right, let's have a little conversation about this. I personally like to run full tilt boogie. I have very little personal time, downtime in my life. I'm still a working mom. And so for me, I like to let my machine run full tilt boogie. However, there are times I might choose to put on a specialty thread, like a metallic around, the holidays. So if I'm using a metallic threads are a little bit high maintenance. And so maybe I want to slow down when I'm using a metallic thread because it's shredding or fraying or breaking. So I always give the analogy that think about the Karate Kid where he hurts his knee and Mr. Miyagi goes like that really, really fast. That's because he's building up heat and friction. So the faster you're embroidering, the more buildup of heat and friction you're putting on your thread and on your needle. And some threads don't like heat and friction. So if you set your machine up to embroider more slowly, you're going to get less heat and friction on your thread, on your needle. So you are able to increase or decrease the speed at which your machine is working to compensate for your thread choices or for your fabric choices. So right here, we've got the maximum speed at the default, which is 850. It does not go any faster than that. However, I can go much more slowly. So it goes all the way down to 350 stitches per minute. So it's going to be a much slower, much smoother thing for those metallic threads or for rayon threads. Again, rayon is a natural fiber, so it kind of behaves differently than a nice, strong quality polyester thread. Honestly, for me, most of the time I just use polyester thread because it's strong, it's easy, and there is no fight with it. It's going to be perfect every time. So that generally, for me, I'm like, I need it right the first time. That's the thread that I generally choose. But there are some times that I want a little bit of extra sparkle and I need a little metallic in my life. So this is where I can slow down so that it is successful as it is embroidering. All right, next you have the embroidery tension. So if your bobbin thread is pulling up, or if there's something that just doesn't look right, maybe it's pulling down too much, you can come in here and make adjustments to your embroidery tension. I have to say though, I've had my BabyLock machine for a very long time, and I have never actually had to go in here and change my embroidery bobbin tension. I just haven't. So for me, it's nice to know that most of the time I can leave that alone and I'll have perfect success every time. All right, next page. We're going to move on to page 7. Embroidery foot auto down. This is something I would always turn on. Why? because instead of having to put my foot down and then press my start button, I can simply press my start button and the machine will put my foot down and start embroidering. For embroidery, I specifically love this because my fabric is already held steady in my hoop. It's not going anywhere. So I can hit start and the machine will put the foot down and go. And it just saves me one step, and I need all the saving and minutes given back to me that I can get. So I love that auto down. Next, we have the embroidery foot height. So I generally leave this at the default, but just like free motion quilting, if I was using a high loft batting, if I'm doing an in the hoop embroidery project where the whole thing is constructed in the hoop, I might want to raise my presser foot height if I start to get, let's say I'm doing a vinyl crossbody bag. I've got layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And as I do that, I might start to see smooshing and motion. Again, the presser foot moving my fabric. If I start to see that, that's a problem. So I can quickly hit stop, come in here to my operational settings, and maybe increase my presser foot height. So this allows me to not get smooshing and pooshing, that it'll not embroider nice the way it's supposed to. So keep an eye on that if you start to embroider anything super thick, or if you're working on a towel that's super thick and lush and plush, you can increase your embroidery foot height to not get any smooshing or pooshing. When you're done with that project though, be sure and come back down to your default settings, because if your foot is too high, now your fabric is flapping around in there and it can create a problem with that as well. Smooshing and pooshing is bad, flapping around is bad. So you want to find that nice middle ground for whatever project that you're doing, okay? All right, next we have the background display color choice. So let me give you an example of this one. When my child was little, she would say to me, "Mama, that's not right. Our shirts are going to be pink." "What do you mean it's not right? I just chose a design. It's just a white background because that's my display area." But she couldn't see it because she couldn't see it, what it's going to look like in the end. So if you want to preview your color choices and you want to know exactly what it's going to look like on the fabric that you've chosen, you can come to your operational menu and you can go to your background area and you can select the pink for the shirt that you're using. "Oh, it's perfect, Mama. I love it." Did I change anything? No. But now she can see what it's going to look like in reality on a nice pink screen that matches her nice pink shirt. Another circumstance for this would be if you guys are doing golf towels or something for your group, you might go, "Ooh, these color choices are not going to look good on that green towel we chose." So this is a section that allows you to set it up to see what it's going to look like and make sure your color choices are appropriate for that background fabric. The other option you have here, I'm going to put that back to white just because I like a white background, is your thumbnail background color. All right, so let me come back over here and choose this. These are your thumbnails. So if I had a collection of, say, white snowflakes, because every snowflake is unique and different, right? It might be hard to see a snowflake that's white on a white background. So in that particular circumstance, maybe I want to choose purple so that I can see my design better. So again, you'll come into your operational menu. You'll go right on over to page 7. Your second option is your thumbnail option. You can choose a purple. And now you're able to see your designs on that purple background. I find that very helpful, especially if I'm doing snowflakes or lace. A lot of people like to do lace earrings. This is going to let you see which design you want to actually use, because you can have a colored background and the white shows up on a colored background. Again, much easier than on a white background. All right, so let's go back there to page 7. And I'm going to change that back over to white and select OK. All right, so that's your first option, is your embroidery editing area background color. The second option is your thumbnail background color. All right, I'm going to move on to page 8. And that's the thumbnail size. I like it large. It's hard to see these thumbnails just to begin with. This isn't the biggest of screens, and as I've gotten older, it's harder to see just in general, so I like the large thumbnail size. Let me put it on small so you can see the difference. If I put it on small, all of a sudden I have itty bitty little pictures, and it's hard for me to pick which one I actually want. So generally most of the time, the first thing I do is to take my thumbnail size to the large size. Okay, next option you have is inches or millimeters, and by that it will tell you how big the design is in inches or how big the design is in millimeters. I'm accustomed to inches because I grew up here in America, but Brother and BabyLock, they're international companies. So they allow you to pick whichever measurement style works best for you. All right, let's go on to the next page, page 9. All right, do you want the needle to stop in the down position or the up position? So most of us prefer to have the needle stop in the down position because if you go to turn a corner, you don't want your fabric to just go flying out from under your foot. So the needle will act as a locking kind of thing for your fabric so you can turn that corner and maintain your position. So you have the choice though. You can pick whichever one you want. The buzzer on or off. Sometimes I accidentally brush the side of the screen here with my elbow, and if it beeps, I hear an audio cue that says, oh no, you just touched something. So oftentimes I like to leave my buzzer on, but if it's annoying to you, the beeping and the indication, the sound indication, you're welcome to turn it off. You're the boss of the machine. Next you have is the opening screen. So when you turn on the machine, it's going to have a nice little slideshow of inspiration for you to see. After you've seen it once or twice though, you might not want to see it anymore. I personally like to leave my opening screen off so that when I turn my machine on, it opens up in my embroidery screen if I have my embroidery arm on, or it opens up in my sewing screen if I have just no embroidery arm on, just my accessory unit on the end of my machine. So I personally just like to wake up in whatever mode I'm working on. So I like to take my opening screen and turn that one off. Personally, that's how I work. You can choose a variety of languages, so feel free to pick whichever one works for you. Next page, page 10. Your bed light. So most of the time it's awesome to have this big beautiful LED full bed lighting on your machine, but perhaps if you're working with tone on tone sewing and it's hard to see your cream thread on your cream fabric, if you put a desk lamp off to the side, you can shine the lamp across your project and see the texture of what you're working on, so you can turn that bed light off. Not a circumstance you're going to be in very often, but it's nice to know that you can if you need to. The input sensitivity allows you to make changes to how the screen is interacting with the amount of pressure you use when you touch it. I generally leave it alone at default. I've never had to walk through changing that. I would encourage you, if it's not responding, press a little harder. But if you're still having trouble, you can come in here and walk through a series of prompts to increase or decrease the sensitivity of the screen to your amount of pressure that you're using with your fingertips. Okay, next page, page 11. This is the stitch count on the machine. So after your machine has been serviced, your technician should clear this down to 0. So this is kind of like letting you know, oh gosh, I'm at, 752,000 stitches. Boy, I better go in for service. This allows you to see that stitch count that your machine is at since it has been serviced. Your technicians can actually see the life of your machine. So if you're ever curious, I wonder how many stitches I have on this machine, just ask your technician and they'll be able to tell you. The next thing you have is the number. This number right here is married to the electronic components and printed circuit boards within your machine. So this is more for your technicians to know if they have an update they need to run. It's good for them to have that internal number available to them. The version number right here. Okay, so just like our cell phones update periodically and you'll get, it's time for a system update, your machine periodically needs to be updated as well. So if you make sure you register your machine, of course, when you purchase your machine, and if you get your BabyLock email sent to you, they will inform you, hey, we've got a new update. We're now at version 1.89. You can come in and look and see, oh gosh, I'm behind the curve. I need to update my machine. And actually, the series of prompts that they have to do that is pretty easy. So that's one thing you should keep an eye out for, is making sure your machine stays up to date. Or when you bring it in for service, you can also tell your technician, please go ahead and update my machine for me. So that's where you can see what version you're at. If you select reset here on reset to default, it's going to globally reset the machine to all of the defaults, which is good to know that it can do that, but there are some things I have set that I never want to change, like my reinforcement priority. I love to leave that on. The automatic tension, I love to leave that on. I don't want it going back to being turned off. So I would say if you feel like I just want to start fresh, you can go ahead and reset to defaults, but most of the time there are some things that you're going to want to leave in place because you found it works for you. All right, let's go to page 12. This is where we can get into our wireless section of the machine. So this is where you can turn your wireless on. When you do that, it's going to ask you to wait for a while. And then it's got it set up now for the machine to be on in Wi-Fi. You are allowed to go into your wireless LAN wizard, and it's going to search for whatever networks are in your area. So now I'm being given a list of available networks for me to select. Of course, I'm here in the sewing studio, so I'm going to select Sewing Studio Guest. Because I've already signed up on this particular Wi-Fi, I can just go ahead and apply my settings and select OK. If you have not turned on your Wi-Fi or connected to that yet, you'll need to tap in your password, and there's an uppercase and lowercase option. Make sure your password, which is always case sensitive, that you're using your uppercase when you've chosen it, lowercase when you've chosen it. Once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and select OK, and then your machine is going to think about it for a minute and then connect to your Wi-Fi, and you'll select OK to get out of there. So that's pretty cool. The wireless LAN setting lets you see whether you're active and whether you're strong and what your settings are. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK to get out of there. Let's go on to the next page, page 13. This is where you can go in and change your machine from sewing machine, whatever number it happens to be. They come out of the box with numbers, but you could change it to Sparkles or I love pug dogs or whatever you want it to be. You can change your machine name so that when you go to send something wirelessly over to your machine, you can be like, I love pug dogs. There it is. And you can send it straight to your machine. So whatever you need to do, it just makes it easier for you to identify your machine. Next, you have others. When you select others, it's going to give you some other information about your Wi-Fi settings. I rarely go into there, but you're welcome to look if you're a tech type person. Let's go to the very last page, page 14. Oops. So when I'm here on 14, with the wireless set on your machine, you can check for updates. And once you do that, it'll tell you what the latest version is and whether or not that version is installed. One last thing I want to point out here is this icon off to the right. It is there through every single page of your settings. So what is that? Well, if I've made a change, for instance, I've slowed my machine down to 350 stitches per minute. When I select this, what it'll do is it'll give me the option of saving to a USB media, a screenshot of my settings. So if I go back to do this project again, I can have on my USB media those particular settings saved as a screenshot. So that's a really cool feature. It's kind of like a little built-in memory bank for you. You can save your screen settings off to your USB, and then that way you can pull them out again next year when you go to do that Christmas tree skirt or whatever it is that's something you do annually or whatever. So that's really cool. Screenshots right there. And that's it for the menu. So we can select OK to get out of there. All right. So let's start with the home screen for embroidery, and let's start to go over actually editing and shaping all the different sections of embroidery that we have. Get ready, get that cup of coffee, because here comes some good stuff. Okay, so first of all, in the bottom right-hand corner here, we have a little Wi-Fi icon. When you see that, it takes you to page 12, which is your Wi-Fi settings in your operational menu. So it's just a little shortcut button that takes you there. The next thing you have is a pocket. When you select the pocket, you have 3 different areas that you can save information to. This area right here will wirelessly save it into your back over to your computer, into your settings, and that's where it'll say after it's done that, it'll take that design if you've been working on it, and it'll erase it out of your machine because it's sent it over into the Wi-Fi. I have to say, I rarely use that option. I'm either using my USB or my built-in memory pocket. So if you select a USB, you're allowed to pull designs off of your USB stick. You'll see them displayed and you can pick whichever one you want. Or if you use your internal memory pocket, these are things you might have saved in. So again, once you select that, these little icons will show up of whatever design you may or may not have saved into your machine. And you can select it and set it and move on. Next, we have the always press when removing embroidery unit. So this button right here on the left side, if I decide I need to go take class with Kathryn because she's an awesome teacher, I'm going to take my machine with me to class. In order to do that safely, I'm going to want to seat this arm off to the left. What does that mean? By selecting this button and selecting OK, it has moved my embroidery arm off to the left so that I can safely remove my embroidery unit and go put it in my luggage or whatever. You don't want the embroidery arm centered on the embroidery unit. If you're traveling, the weight isn't distributed properly. So they want you to make sure that the weight is off on the left end of your embroidery arm so that it's distributed there so it can go into the luggage the way that it needs to. All right. Let's start in the bottom right-hand corner, our frames. And the first thing it's telling me is I got to bring my arm back in. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK. So here we have our frames. You have the ability to add a frame around any design, whether you've brought it in from a USB, whether you've sent it over wirelessly, or whether it's a built-in design from the machine. So by selecting your frames, the first thing you need to do is pick the shape of the frame that you want. So let's say you want to do a heart because you love hearts. I've got 4 pages of outline styles. So once I have my shape, I then need to choose, oh, I want a satin stitch. Oh, I want a blanket stitch. You get to choose all different kinds of outline styles for that particular frame. Your first one here, I want to explain, it looks like there are 3 lines side by side, but they're not actually side by side. They're on top of one another. So it's hard to draw that on screen. So if you select option number 1, it's really good for doing like raw edge applique, but it'll stitch 3 times around in the same spot. Option number 2 is your satin stitch, and you've got a really wide variety here. Again, you've got 4 pages of different kinds of outlines. I love this little one. He's got like a little lace kind of thing around it. This is your traditional blanket stitch. So every one of these, once you've picked your shape, it applies that outline style to that shape for you, so you can make your choice. So let's say I've decided I want that blanket stitch. I'm going to go ahead and select set, and there it is on my embroidery screen. And then you're able to begin editing. And I'll go into editing as we get into the design section, but that's how you choose your shapes. Okay, I'm going to go back home and start with that. Next, you have fonts. When you have fonts, you've got 3 pages of fonts that you're able to choose from. The exclusive script is a really pretty font that is exclusive to BabyLock. This is a nice scrolly italicized style of font, which allows you to choose a letter. So there I've got my L, but that doesn't look like that L. That's okay. This is just a little preview window right up here in the top of the screen. And this 1 right here indicates that I'm on line 1 of my lettering. I have gotten in the habit of selecting size medium because my name is Kathryn. It's a very long name, so if I've chosen a smaller hoop, sometimes I can only type out K-A-T and it tells me to change to a bigger hoop. So from medium, you can more quickly change to larger or smaller. So that's just where I got in the habit because I have such a long name. So I go right to medium. Notice here in this tab that it's uppercase and lowercase letters, but you can only see a short number of letters here in the uppercase. So if I need to do the next letter, let's say I'm doing love and I want it to be lowercase, I need to scroll to the right to get that letter O. So there I've got L-O. This is on page 3. V, I can't see. All I can see is S, so I have to go one more page to the right. There's the V. And now I have to go back to the left to find my E, and there it is right there. So L-O-V-E, I can see that it's there. There's a check button, which allows you to make sure you've got it all spelled out properly. That's really good, especially if you've written out something super long. Now you can see the whole thing in your check button. Delete is there in case I had spelled out L-O-V-A instead of L-O-V-E. You can delete that character and fix it. So let me just show you what that looks like. If I select delete, the E is gone, and now I have to find the E, which is the right spelling again, and it's set there on my screen. So if everything looks okay and I'm not doing multi-line text, which I'll go to in a second, I'm going to go ahead and select set. So there's the word love. This button right here, which I'll get into a little bit further when we do designs, that gives you a nice little zoom in so that you can see what it looks like spelled out. Now, if I want to edit my font, I'm going to go into my font editing button. So when I select that button, one of the first things I want to do is select the font style. Let's say I've decided this is a little bit too scrolly, too italicized for my taste. There are 3 different styles here, so I can select that icon and it takes me into my scripts so that I can choose a more block script or a more university style of script. I can go to page 2. I can check this one. Maybe I like this L better than the first L. Or maybe I'm doing something childish and I want more like a chalkboard style of lettering. So this is really cool. It lets you find a font and decide, oh, that's the one I want. Wait, actually, that's the one I want. Once you find a font that you're okay with, you're going to go ahead and select OK. All right, so now that I'm there, I'm back on my font editing screen. So let's talk about multicolor. If I select multicolor, notice that the colors don't change on the screen. I'll do that in just a bit, that I can change those colors. However, what changes is when I go all the way to embroidery, you'll see here in my preview window that it only displays the letter L, because now it's going to do L-O-V-E. I have 4 separate options for color. So let me go back to that font editing button. If I deselect multicolor and go back to embroidery, now you can see it says one color black and my entire word appears in my preview window. So that's a way to select multicolor, which is really cool. If you're trying to do something in rainbow colors or whatever, that's a way to do it, is to just select multicolor. Array is one of my favorite features. I always tell people I'm a ray of sunshine because array is a mathematical term and I'm not a mathematical person and I don't understand that. But a ray of sunshine is a nice big smile. If I select array, it can let me smile, my nice big smile. Once I've chosen that, I might say to myself, that's too deep of a curve. So I can actually soften out that curve, or I can increase the curve. Maybe I decided I wanted to frown. I'm having a sad day. I can soften out that curve, or I can increase that curve. It's really cool that you've got those little tiny options or deeper options or softening out or increasing. Those are all there at your fingertips, able for you to choose. This one's really cool too. This is kind of like a Ferris wheel. if you are on a Ferris wheel, your position changes, but you never get turned upside down. So this allows the letters to kind of rotate around one another, but they never get turned upside down. So if I want my L on top of my O, on top of my V, on top of my E, like that, you just have to hold down that angle, and that angle will let it change for you. If you've decided you just want to go back flat, you don't want any angle, that's kind of like a reset button there. It takes you back flat, and you can select OK. So that's your array option. So multicolor lets it stop after every letter and change to a new color. Array will give it a smile or a frown, or it puts it on a Ferris wheel. Your style button is there for you to pick a different style if you just can't stand that particular font. This is a spacing key. So this is where it will allow you to have some breathing room between your letters. It'll allow you to fill up your hoop if you want to fill up your hoop instead of having it be so contained in the center. So if I select this icon right here, I have the option of spacing my letters apart. This is a reset icon down here, so I can select that and it comes back in to the default setting, or I could push my letters together. But see, that's a little too cramped for this font style, so I can reset. This is an important icon to know that's available to you. Say you've purchased an italicized font and the letters are spaced out and you want to connect them because it should look like handwriting, cursive. So by spacing them closer together, you can allow that cursive look to happen with certain fonts. So that's cool to know. And again, that's your reset button. And OK says to the machine, I'm okay with those choices. All right, I'm going to skip over this icon for a second and talk about this one. With this one, you'll notice that there is a red selection box around one letter. What this does is allow me to change the size of that given letter. It's really popular to have a large last name letter and smaller other letters. However, I could actually select the last letter and make that big too. So by putting the selection box around a given letter, I'm able to make changes to that specific letter. I'm going to go back there and bring it small. Now it's back in closer to the rest of the letters that it's friends with. The other thing is maybe I've decided that L is not the style that I like. Because it's only selected on that one letter, I can make a change to just that letter. So I could select this and maybe choose just a block letter for the L, and then go over to the next letter and decide I want a university style for that, and go over to the next letter. It allows you to choose different fonts for the one specific letter that you've chosen. So that's a really cool option as well. So you can change either the size or the style of any given individual letter. That's a really cool thing to do. OK gets you out of that section. All right, now I'm going to explain this one, but I'm going to do it in terms of a monogram. So I'm going to come back home and select OK. I'm going to come back to my regular fonts. And I'm going to choose this one because I like this one for monograms personally. K is my first initial, C is my last name initial, and M is my middle initial. So I'm going to go ahead and select set and get that on the screen. So with a traditional monogram, you have that diamond shape where you've got your first name, last name, middle initial. Modern monograms tend to be all in one size, and it tends to be initials like your normal initials, first, middle, last. So depending on which way you want to go, whether you want to be more modern or more traditional, this one button I'm going to show you lets you find the traditional way of doing. So I'm going to go into my font edit button so that I can edit my fonts. And here I have my A separated from my B and my C. So when I select that, you can use a knife to cut your letters apart from each other. Again, my ultimate goal is to have a large center last name letter and smaller first and middle letters for that traditional style of monogram. So my little knife is hovering between my K and my CM. So I can select that knife And now you'll see there's a selection box around the CM, but not around the K. In this particular circumstance, I need each of my 3 letters to be individual letters, not part of a whole right now. So I'm going to go ahead and use my knife one more time, and now I've got a selection box just around the M. So I'm going to go ahead and select OK to get out of this section. Now, one of the things you've got to remember when you're here working in the embroidery editing area is that the machine can only do one thing at a time. If I go to make spaghetti sauce and I taste my soup, this needs more salt, I have to put the spoon down in order to pick up my salt tool. So I then pick up my salt tool and I'm ready to add more salt in. So I have to get out of my separating section so that I can go into sizing or into moving or into another tool. So if you're holding on to one tool, you can't pick up another one. So OK will close out that tool and allow you to choose another tool. So I need to go into my sizing tool. I need my K and my M to be smaller so my middle last name is bigger. So I've got my selection box around my M and I need to get out of my font editing tool. So I'm going to say OK to get out of my font editing tool, and I'm going to enter my size tool. So once I've entered my size tool, I can then take my letter M and I'm going to 4-way size that down, which means the whole thing gets smaller. I'm going to go ahead and say OK because I'm all right with that. And I can see right here that that M is, let's make it 75 because why not? Okay, so it's 3/4 of an inch tall. So now that I know that that's 3/4 of an inch tall, I can go over to my letter K and make my letter K 3/4 of an inch tall. Why aren't I worried about the width? Well, different letters are going to have different widths. An I is going to have one width. A W is going to have an entirely different width. So when I'm editing my fonts, I tend to concentrate on paying attention to the height of a given letter because that's all going to be the same. That should be the same anyway. All right, so now I need to move over to my K to make my K 3/4 of an inch tall. So I'm going to say OK to get out of my size tool, and I'm going to use my select button here, and that's going to bounce around to the next letter. So there I have my letter K, and I'm going to go ahead and select size once again and 4-way size that down until I get to 3/4 of an inch in height. So you can hold it, or as you get, look right there, I got it perfectly. If you get close to it, you can tap, 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 which is going to allow you to go down into tiny increments. If you have a long way to go, you can just hold the button down and let go to check it. All right, so now I've got my K at 3/4 of an inch, my M at 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to say OK to get out of this screen. So let's zoom in on this real quick just to see what it looks like. So I might decide at this point that I need to move my letters closer to my C or whatever I need to do to make it look right. So I'm actually going to select over to the letter C and go to size, and let's see if we can make that any bigger. All right, good. So now that's almost 1 3/4 inches tall. Let's zoom in one more time. That actually solved my problem. So right here, I can check the distance between my K and my C, and then the same thing over here between my C and my M. So I might want to bring that M just a little bit in. Okay. So when it comes to dealing with fonts, not all fonts are created equal. Let's say I had the letter D. And on my letter D, I've got a little bar over there and 2 little wings off to the left side of my letter D. Depending on how I position my letters on the left side of the D, because that bar is there, they might appear 1.5 miles away from my letter D, where the letter that's next to the curve might appear like it's right next to the letter D. So when it comes to your letters, you need to make it look right, whatever's happy for you, however you want it to actually look. One letter may actually be closer to center than the other letter, the right side letter. That's fine. As long as it looks the way you want it to look, then we're good to go. All right, so I'm going to select OK to get out of there. Everything looks good to me, and I'd be good to go off and embroider. Okay, so that was that icon there. And that pretty much wraps up all of our font editing buttons except for this one. So that's the horizontal and vertical selection. So let me explain why that's there. If I go home and I select my fonts and I go to the last page of fonts, you'll notice that these are foreign characters. So the horizontal and vertical option lets you orient those letters in the vertical writing or the horizontal writing. One of the coolest features about the BabyLock Vesta is that it has a multi-line text option. So if I'm doing a poem or something like that, it allows me to hit enter so that I can get to my next line. So I'm going to select my lettering and I'm going to just go ahead and select this basic block font. So if I'm typing something out and I'm done with line 1 and I need to enter to get to the next line, I'm just going to select the enter button. Now see that the number 2 appears because this is the second line. So I'm going to select my second line and enter. And for my third line, there I go. Now, I cannot see line 1 or line 2 from this screen. So if I want to check it, remember again, I can go into my check button and that lets me see a little preview of all 3 lines of text. So that's really, really cool. If I'm okay with it, I'm going to select to get okay out of my check screen and I can go ahead and set my multi-line text onto my screen. So there I've got my multi-line text, but you'll notice that this last line is the only line of text that has the red box around it. So what's cool about multi-line text is that it automatically inserts the same amount of space between line 1 and 2 as there is between line 2 and 3. However, what's a little bit tricky is that I might be looking at this and think, man, I wanted to fill out my screen with that. It's not big enough. Well, if I need to modify a line of text, I have to do that individually. So I would then go to size and make that bigger. If I've done that, now I have to play with moving it down from the DE because it's sitting on top of it. So I have to get out of my size tool and go to my move tool and move that down. So from the home screen, I'm going to go ahead and select these large characters. So you have 2 different large character font styles. I'm going to go ahead and start by selecting this particular one. My last name is Conti, so I'm going to choose C, and I've got my big letter there. So when I've selected that letter, up here in the top right-hand side of the screen, I can see that this letter is almost 5 inches tall, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and select Set. I have the ability to make some editing choices here, but the one that I want to start with is this icon right here. This takes you into your thread palette so you can paint the screen with whatever color choices you want to make. So this particular pastel palette feels a little bit 1980s to me. And I've seen this stitched out in fall colors and it's absolutely gorgeous. So let me show you how we paint the screen with our color choices. In other words, my color choices. So I'm going to start by selecting that little color palette icon. When I select that, it takes me into where I can see the very first color in the design is my last name letter, the letter C. So I can see here on the right that this is page 1 of 4 pages of color options. So if I want to go to the next page of color options, that I'm going to do down here with these arrows. So I'm going to scroll to the right, and there I have my second page of color options. Again, I want to do fall colors, so I'm going to make my C brown. So there, right on the screen, I've seen the colors change over in my editing area as well as here in my little preview window. That's the color I want. Well, how do I change the next color in the design? Over here on the right, I can actually select my plus spool. And that takes me to the next color in the design, which is leaf green. Well, most leaves are green, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that at green. So I'm okay with that color. Let me advance to the next color or the next spool of thread I'd be using in the design. So I'm going to touch my plus spool. So the next thing I have is salmon pink. I don't want to do salmon pink. I want to do fall colors. So I'm going to choose this more pumpkin color. So there I've got my pumpkin color chosen. And I can see it there in the little dab on the flower, but I can also see it here on the screen. I'm good with pumpkin. I'm going to advance to the next color. So the next color is sunflower. Instead of doing sunflower, I'm going to back up to the first page and I want to choose this amber red. Again, I can see it on my design as well as in my preview window what that's going to look like. And I'm good with that amber red. So I'm going to advance to the next. I don't want purples. They're not very fall, not a pale purple. So I'm going to select this carmine. And there I can see right on my screen where I've got my carmine color. Let me advance to the next color, blue lavenders. No, I don't want that palette. Let me go to something a little bit more. Let's do a sagey green. So let's do like that. Okay, let's go see what that looks like. It says moss. If I want to preview this, yes, I can see it on my screen, but if I select OK, I can come up here to this icon again. And when I select that, I get a nice up close look at my design. So I might decide, you know what? I'm not okay with that moss. I want to change that to something else. So I'm going to select OK to get out of that window and go back into my thread palette. I need to advance to moss, which I know was the last one, so I hit the minus spool, which took me backwards, and I can see that moss green. Instead of doing moss green, let me choose like a buttery, creamy colored. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so at this point, I might decide, yes, that's totally what I want to do. I'm good to go. If I like those color choices, I'm going to go ahead and select OK. And that gets me into my editing screen so that I can start to make choices there. So that's a really cool thing to point out. With this font in particular, I don't think I've ever had one customer stitch it out with the original color choices, but it's really, really good to know that you can very quickly and very easily colorize your design for your particular preferences. The other cool thing about that is that now when the machine asks for carmine, you can actually have your colors set up beside you and you can put the carmine on the machine because it's telling you that's the next color in the design, as opposed to, wait, it's on pale blue. What color was I going to use? Well, now it tells you the color because you've chosen it ahead of time. All right, let's go back to the home screen and select OK to get out of there. And I'm going to come back into this large font tab one more time. I want to point out one more thing here in this particular font. If I want to see, look here, there's 8 pages of letters, but it's not just letters. So if I want to skip to the end to see what the letter Z looks like, which no one ever does, let me come back and I'm going to do my minus backwards arrow here on the bottom. So actually, what you would never see unless you went to that last page is that this particular font also has companion pieces. So if I have my large letter C, but now I want to do that on a towel, and now I have washcloths that I want to have to match my large letter C for my towel, I can choose from some companion pieces that I might want to put on the bottom band of the towel, or maybe I want to put it to the left of my letter, or on my washcloth. Maybe I just want one small motif that will then go on the corner of my washcloth. It's really, really cool to know that there are companion pieces. That's page 8. Here on page 7, there's a flat one. So if I look at that, that would be really good underneath my large letter. So don't forget you have companion pieces beyond your alphabet. All right, let's go back to our home screen. And we're going to choose our large letters one more time. And I want to select this font. This is a really cool kind of medieval looking font. I just think it's so sweet. Let's see. Let's pick an S. Look how cool that is. There's some really cool features in this, but let me show you again, there are companion pieces at the end of this font too. So there's a little teeny thing there, which you might put somewhere else, like on the corner, again, on the corner of a hand towel or on the corner of a washcloth. You've got a little curve. This one I think would be so pretty on the edge of a placemat or on the edge of some linen napkins if you're trying to set up your Thanksgiving table. So there are some other pieces in there that are really, really beautiful beyond your large font options. All right. So that wraps up talking about the large fonts. Let's talk about this section of the machine right here. So when I select this section, I have several different subsections that I could choose from. This one has more designs in it. This one here is companion pieces for buttonholes. So let's start with our buttonholes. I'm going to return out of that screen and select a buttonhole. Once I've selected the buttonhole, I have 3 different pages of buttonhole styles. So let's choose an oval one and select set. So first of all, that buttonhole is 3.93 inches long. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. So when would you ever use a large buttonhole like that? Actually, the buttonholes are really cool if you consider home dec. So pillow bands are very popular. You can do seasonal pillow bands. You can have a St. Patrick's Day like 4-leaf clover fabric, or you could have red and white hearts for Valentine's Day and do a pillow band for home decor. That would allow you to choose a large button, like you can find a large heart or something like that, a large clover, and now you can have a nice, beautiful embroidered buttonhole that is going to fit that large button for home decor. Or these buttonholes could be used at the top of a shower curtain or something like that. It's really cool to know that you can use them in that type of purpose. So if I'm using a large buttonhole on a curtain, maybe I want to embellish it a little bit more. Within this particular section, I'm going to go ahead and select Add and go back to my buttonhole area. And now this tab, these are just the buttonholes. These are the buttonhole embellishments. So I could select one of these designs, rotate it 90 degrees, and move it down and to the left of my buttonhole. So there I have a little embellishment curved in nice and tight around my buttonhole. So the buttonhole embellishment area is there for you to take advantage of as well. However, just because it's in the buttonhole area doesn't mean it has to be used as a buttonhole embellishment. This little flower right here, which is in the buttonhole embellishment section, I had one customer that made little cork napkin rings. So she cut 6 inches by 1 inches, and she embroidered right in the center of this terracotta colored cork this particular small motif. So she created her own embroidered napkin rings off of this teeny tiny motif because he's perfect for fall, perfect for her terracotta colored cork. You've paid for this machine, or hopefully if you don't have it, you're gonna pay for it because this is an awesome machine. So why not take advantage of every little part and piece of the machine? If a design is in there, you can use it however and wherever you want. So it's cool to know these buttonhole embellishments are there, but you don't have to use them around a buttonhole. You could choose to put them on a napkin ring. So I'm going to say okay to get out of here, and I'm going to go back home to my home screen for embroidery. So this section has buttonholes, buttonhole embellishments, or you can use them wherever you want. And then there's other designs in there. I'm going to start by selecting this tab right here. In this tab, I'm going to actually choose this first little bunny. She's small and she's directional. And she's really easy to use for lessons. So I'm going to show you, this is the one that we're going to start to do the bulk of our embroidery lesson on. So I'm going to go ahead and select set. So now I have set her on the screen and I'm ready to start editing her and shaping her and moving her and doing whatever I want with her. So in the top left-hand corner, I've got a magnifying glass. When you select that magnifying glass, you can choose different percentages of magnification. So let's say I chose 200%. Now that gives me a tiny little dot grid above and below my bunny, so that if I had added lettering above and below, I'm 3 dot lines up. That means I need to be 3 dot lines down for any extra like lines of text I might put around her, like say I put a name or Hoppy on the top and Easter down below. It lets me have a nice close look at exactly where things are positioned around my center motif. All right, so I'm going to go back to 100% and select OK. So I'm going to add Hoppy Easter there so we can see that. I'm going to select Add and go to my fonts. Let's just choose a block font. And I'm going to do Hoppy H medium. Remember I said choose medium. OPPY set. So I've got Hoppy above my bunny. Okay, let's add from our fonts, from the block, Easter. E-A, got to go to the next page. S-T, got to go to the first page. E, next page, R, and set. So Hoppy Easter. And I'm going to move that down. Okay, so if I zoom in on it, let's say 200%. Now I have the ability to see whether I'm above or below consistently. And as you can clearly see, oh wait, where did it go? Well, I've zoomed in 300%. And I did that on purpose because I want to show you if I want to look down at my spacing, I'm going to touch my down arrow to look down. So now I can see I'm 1 clean line, 2 clean lines, and a half. So let's look up and see what exactly we are. The Hoppy is much further away. It is 3 lines away. So if I need to move the Hoppy down, I'm going to take myself out of magnification. Remember, you have to put down one tool to pick up another. I'm going to select. It selected the bunny. Select. It selected Hoppy. So now I can move Hoppy down just a little bit. Let's zoom in on it. Again, I have to touch my look up button to see it. So then it allows you to have that nice little dot grid for perfect positioning placement. So I like to zoom in, especially if I'm putting lettering around a center motif. It makes it really easy to make sure that you're precisely in the same place on the above side and on the below side. Okay, let's go back to 100% and get out of here. Let's say I don't want Hoppy Easter anymore. See how Hoppy is selected? If I select the delete key, it asks me, are you sure you want to cancel this selection? Yes, I want to cancel that current pattern. I don't want Hoppy anymore, so I can select OK. Now Easter is selected. Again, I don't want it anymore, so I can select delete. Are you sure you want to cancel this? Yes, it's okay to cancel it. So that lets me get back to where I just have my singular center motif. Okay, so that's the zoom in, zoom out button with the little tiny dot grid. Now, if you look right here, it's going to show me the allowable hoops for this particular design. If I scooch that away, it just dropped off my 4x4 hoop and shows me now I can only use my 5x7 or my 6x10. Let's say I move it out a little bit more. Now the 5x7, 4x4, and the baby hoop, those are all gone, and I have to use my 6x10 hoop. So it's not always about the size of the design, but it's where you're putting your design in your hoop. If you put your design off in left field, you need a hoop that includes left field. So this is giving you that indication of where those things are. Now, if I want to move that bunny back dead center, I can tell you right out, it's going to be impossible for me to do that. I breathe. And so when I'm breathing, I might scooch it a little bit too far up or a little bit too far down. So by selecting my move key, I can touch my dead center dot and it will bring it back at my dead center, and now I can see that. So just like graphing in the 5th grade, everything up and to the right of center is going to have a positive distance away from center. Everything down and to the left is going to have a negative distance away from center. And again, that becomes very important if you're doing something like, say, a monogram, where you might want to equally space my right side versus my left side, as long as it looks okay with the letters that I've chosen. I want her back dead center, so I'm going to select that dead center dot. So with your movement keys, it allows you a much higher level of precision than just using your stylus and moving things around the screen. I like to do that if I'm just quickly getting something out of the way, but if I want something back dead center, I'm going to select move and select my dead center dot to make sure that I have brought myself right back to dead center. All right, the next option we have is size. So let me explain that. When I select size, I've got a red box here, which tells me that this bunny is 265 tall by 261 wide. Okay, that's good to know. However, this also says 265 tall and 261 wide. Okay. So this icon on the top is actually indicating the size of everything you're working on. Since I only have one thing I'm working on, it's the same number both within the size key and up at the top of the screen. So if I was to move this out of the way for a second, and I'm going to add the letter K, and I bring my K all the way down here. So there's a red selection box around the letter K. There's no selection box around my bunny. When I select size, I can see that this is indicating 1.14 tall by 99 wide. That's the size of the selected object, where this size, 9.09 tall by 4.43 wide, that's actually the size of everything on my screen, everything that I'm currently working on. Watch these numbers change as I move parts and pieces around the screen. If I move the bunny in and down, that changes that. If I move the bunny all the way out and the K all the way out, that changes that. But the size of the K, no matter where I put her, the size doesn't change. But you can see, watch these numbers here. As I move the letter K, those numbers are changing because the height and width of everything I'm working on changes as I move objects around within my larger embroidery field. Okay, so it's good to know the difference there. I don't want that letter K anymore, so I'm going to select delete to get her off the screen. I'm going to move my bunny back dead center. So these numbers, height and width, again, are indicating everything that you are currently working on. Now, I've touched this button a bunch of times already within this lesson. So this is a design within your hoop, or stitches within your hoop. So when you select that button, it gives you a nice up-close look at your design, a realistic rendering, so you can even see the directionality of the stitches within your design. But another thing that this particular button does is it gives you a sense of perspective within the larger world of the hoop you're using. So if I was to select a 4x4, I could get an indication that, gosh, that bunny's going to be pretty tight within my 4x4 hoop. If I was only doing the bunny, that would be good, because you want to have the smallest hoop that you can use for the size of the design that you've chosen. I don't want to have a tiny little bunny in a gigantic hoop, because then I might have puckering or things like that as a result. So I could see that she's going to fit in there and she's going to look good. But what does she feel like in a 5x7? Well, that gives you a little indication of what she feels like within a 5x7 hoop. Or what does she feel like in a 6x10? So I could clearly see that this is way too big a hoop, and I might end up with some embroidery consequences if I chose to put her in a 6x10 hoop. So again, these three give you a sense of perspective, and over here I can zoom in, and that gives me a sense of what the design actually looks like in its realistic rendering. Okay gets us out of there, and now we're out of that button. All right, let's select move one more time. So I've already talked about this a little bit. Again, I can move it up or down or right or left or northeast, southwest, whichever arrow I choose, it's going to move the design in that area. And I love doing that. Again, it just gives it a much more precise way of moving about the screen. Size is there, and we've done this a little bit in the lettering, but let's look at this bunny. So what actually are these sizing icons here? There are 4 arrows squeezing a box down. Well, that's because when I hold this, it's going to make that whole design smaller, where this one makes the whole design bigger. So the BabyLock Vesta allows you to size up 20% and down 10% from the original way that you brought the design in. So it seems like that might be limited, but actually it can really change the way your design looks. This icon right here is a reset to how it came in. So if I look at that bunny, let's use our two-way sizing options to see how drastically different we can make her look. So I can make her super tall and super thin. Look at how that bunny looks as opposed to super short and super wide. That's an entirely different bunny. You've got Abbott and Costello kicking there. So 20% bigger and 10% smaller really does give you the ability to customize how that particular design looks. And it does that without losing any integrity of the design, because it's not going to go beyond what will warp your design. So 20% bigger is your maximum bigger, 10% smaller is your maximum smaller. All right, reset brings us back to the neutral bunny, how she came in, her original settings, and OK gets us out of there. Oh, I do want to point out one more thing. I forgot. Right here, LMS. Well, there are sometimes some designs that are only going to have a large, a medium, or a small version. Maybe it's a licensed design, so you won't have the option to make it tall and skinny like I just did the bunny. So sometimes you only have the option of having a larger, medium, or small option. So that button will come active and you can choose whichever one you prefer. OK gets us out of the size, and now let's talk about rotate. This is pretty cool because you can rotate by 90s, by 10s, or by 1s. So believe it or not, I had somebody one time who got in a real pickle because she embroidered a name on a jacket down the spine of the jacket because she forgot to rotate it. So remember, it's not just about looking perfect on your screen, but where that's going to end up on the object that you're embroidering. So if you're doing across the shoulders of a jacket, or if you're doing across the bottom of a towel, you're going to need to rotate in the right place to make that happen. So let's talk about the towel example. If I'm going to do a towel, I like to have the bulk of my towel draped off to the left of my machine. This allows me to have right here on the inside of my machine the short side of my towel. So if I'm going to do something like this, I need to rotate that bunny 90 degrees to the left. That way she's facing with her ears towards the top of my towel and her feet towards the bottom of my towel. So that allows me to choose that orientation for how I'm placing my object on my machine. So I love that. I love that I can do that so that I can perfectly place it. Because of course I wouldn't want to have the bulk of my towel here inside the neck of my machine. I'd want to have the bulk of my towel off to the left so that I could just minimize my potential for disaster within the bed of my machine. So rotate lets you go by 90s, by 10s, or by 1s. Once you've selected an appropriate rotation, you would select OK to get out of there. So I'm going to come back up normal for now and go ahead and select OK. We've already talked about your thread palette, that it allows you to choose different colors for a design so you can set yourself up for success. This icon here is a mirror imaging button. So right now her little balloon is off to the right side. If I select this button, now that balloon is off to the left side. So let's say I was doing 2 sofa pillows. I wouldn't want both of my balloons facing the kitchen, right? They'd either need to be nose to nose or back to back. So that's what this icon indicates, is that you can flip your design from one side, flip to the other. It's really cool, especially if you're doing multiple objects of the same design. So I'm going to come back to normal, and there we are. Now, this icon is grayed out. This icon has to do with density. So this icon comes present when we add lettering. No, I don't want to do lettering. Well, there it is right there. So that key lets you increase or decrease the density of that letter N. It's not changing the density of the design, it's only changing the density of the lettering. So when would you use that? Well, if I was doing some thin fabric, maybe I want to decrease the density of my letters for that thin fabric. If I'm doing a super thick towel, maybe I want to increase the density of my lettering on that super thick towel. Honestly, I've embroidered a lot for the last 10 years, and I haven't ever really changed my density. I haven't needed to. The machine with the built-in fonts, it really comes out perfectly almost every time. And if you have a problem, always test stitch, and then you can modify your density per the requirements of your fabric. Okay, let's go back to normal. The 100% normal and OK gets us out of there. I'm going to go ahead and delete that N off the screen. So we're done with the editing features here of this bunny. So again, let's look at the bottom of the screen one more time just for review. If I select add, it's going to let me go back in and add lettering, add another design, add a frame. Add lets you add in other features. Select lets you bounce through the different elements within your page. Again, I could have chosen Hoppy, or I could have chosen Easter, or I could have chosen the bunny. And whoever you select then becomes the active editing options for whatever you're working on. So that's your select key. Now, what if I've made some changes to this and I want to save it into the memory pocket of the machine? All I have to do is select that, and then it tells me, do you want to save it to your machine, out to a USB, or out to the cloud? Well, I'm going to select the machine for this circumstance, and now it's saving it. I'm going to go ahead and go home. So tomorrow's a new day. Let's say I turn my machine off and I turn my machine back on. Tomorrow's a new day and I have 3 more of these bunnies I need to stitch out. Where do I get it from? If I've modified it at all, if I've changed the size at all, I'm going to make sure that I'm choosing the same design for those things that I'm working on. So I'm going to go ahead and select my memory pocket and select my machine. There's my bunny. So I can select my bunny, and I'm not putting it into the memory again. I need to set it on my screen, so I'm pulling it out so that I'm able to work on it once more. So this is where you can save your designs that you're working on, exactly where they are and exactly with whatever modifications you've made, so you can make the other 3 things that you're working on with that same design. It's a pretty cool feature to know that you haven't lost everything. You don't have to recreate everything. You can just pull things right out of your memory. All right, then the last icon we have here is Edit End. This takes us into our formatting screen, and there's some different things that we can talk about here. But I'm going to go ahead and install a hoop so that we can see how this actually works. Okay, so let's take a second to talk about how we're going to hoop. So first of all, you're going to have your slide-in bracket, which is going to go into the embroidery unit. It'll slide right in, and I'll show you that in a moment. But if we take a second to look at this hoop, there are some different things that I need to point out so that you're aware of how you can position things in your hoop. First of all, the hoop has like a little dip down, and then there's this part of the hoop. This is the inner ring, and what it does is it holds your fabric flat and inflexibly against the base or the bed of your machine. So what you need to do is that you need to make sure your inner hoop ring looks like this. There's been a number of times I've gone to get into class and someone has got their hoop like that. These ridges belong on the underside of your machine. They don't belong where you can see them. So this is definitely the wrong way. You want to make sure that your inner ring is going to be positioned like this within the outer ring. Here at the bottom of the hoop, there is a little screw which allows you to loosen so you can take your hoop inner ring in and out more easily. And then once you've done that, you can also tighten. And this actually is a lever which allows you to have easier access to the tightening and loosening of your screw. There are notches on the sides and also on the north and south. So east and west and north and south. These little notches, just again, they are there for you to help line things up so you can get things in position. You also have a positioning grid which came with your machine. Honestly, I rarely use that. I usually mark my fabric and then get my design into position, and we're going to go over that in a moment. So one last thing to point out here is at the top of the hoop, you have two arrows that are pointing north on your inner ring, and you have two arrows that are pointing south on your outer ring. So as you hoop, you want to make sure that your arrows are kissing. That way you're going to get things in properly. All right, so I'm going to take out this inner ring for a moment. For this purpose, I'm only going to put my stabilizer in because I'm going to draw on it so I can show you guys how we get this bunny into position. So I've got my stabilizer here over my outer ring. And the way that I like to hoop is I like to set that inner ring just kind of in the middle, and I like to slide to one side so that it's kind of smoothing everything into position. And then I'm going to push down to get it into that inner ring, and then I'll come to my little screw on the end and I'll go ahead and tighten. It needs to be pretty tight. A finger tight will do. If you don't have a lot of strength in your hands, use your screwdriver to give that extra little tick just to make sure it's in there nice and good. Okay, so now that we've got this ready, I'm going to give you an example of how we position using our formatting screen on the machine. In order to install your hoop onto your machine, you're going to start by opening up the release and locking lever. Then you're going to take your hoop nice and flat on the bed of your machine. Not at some steep angle, nice and flat. And you're going to slide it in with your stabilizer. Sometimes I hold my fingers at the back so that I can make sure the stabilizer goes down and the hoop slips under the foot. Then pay attention over to that locking bracket for your hoop. So your hoop is going to slide in just to the left side of the right side of this moving mechanism. So you're going to slide in. Now, one thing, not all hoops slide in super easily. So one of the things you might want to do is use your left hand to brace the back of this bracket as you're sliding this in with your right hand. Then once you've got your hoop pushed in, you're going to go ahead and use your locking mechanism by flipping that down, and it locks the hoop into position. All right, so here we've arrived at our formatting screen. Your first screen is your primary editing screen. Your second screen is your formatting screen. This is your last chance to kind of like get everything into position before we move on into our final screen, which is the embroidering screen. Okay, so here we are on the formatting screen. And as you can see up here in the top left-hand corner of the screen, I still have my indication as to what hoop I need to use in order to put the bunny there. However, at this point, as I move, because I have my 6x10 hoop on, I can move her wherever I want, and those hoops are going to show up as available hoops. Again, your dead center dot is now right here on the screen available to you to bring the design dead center. However, that's dead center on the screen. And I might not want the design dead center. I might have put my fabric in my hoop just a little bit of off center. So I've marked my fabric to indicate that. So I need to get this design into that spot in order to have the proper positioning. So I'm sure you've heard the expression, possession is 9/10 of the law. Well, in embroidery, positioning is 99/10 of the law, and 1% is the rest of the stuff. So let's see how we can get this into that position. So again, I've got my movement keys there, and now here we have a little green crosshair at the dead center of the design. But she's not in the dead center of the bunny. No, she's not in the dead center of the bunny. She's in the dead center of the design. So depending on the design you've chosen, it may look like that crosshair is not in the dead center, but it really is dependent on the entire space that that design is occupying. And that crosshair right now is showing me that I am in the dead center of that design. All right, so here I have my movement keys. I have a last chance to rotate if I need to. That'll show me the degrees of rotation. And then also down here, this is where I want to start. This is the main thing to get ourselves into position. When I select this key, that's our trial key. Right there, I've got my purple dot over the dead center of the design. That's why that little crosshair is living there in the center of my bunny design. If I select my bottom left-hand corner, now the crosshair is living over there. If I select the top left-hand corner, now the crosshair has moved to there. So depending on how I need to position, I am allowed to choose 9 points to check where I am in the design. If I want to do a quick walk around, this is a quick trace key or trial key. It always reminds me of Pac-Man, walk arounding the screen. So it's going to give a quick swoop, which allows me to see just about where my design is living. So again, from the primary formatting screen, I would select my trial key trace key. If I want a quick walk around, I can select the trial key trace key again, or slowly I can check my 9 points to see where I am. Now from that dead center, if I want that dead center here, exactly in that spot, I'm going to need to select OK to get out of the screen, and I'm going to need to use my movement keys to get myself into position. If you hold it, you'll see it moves quite quickly. If you tap it, it barely looks like it's moving at all. So you need to decide at which speed you are moving to get into position. As you get closer, you definitely want to tap, tap, tap. If you're further away from where you need to be, you can hold it to get closer. Now, I am a big stabber. So what does that mean? So as I've gotten where I think I'm pretty stinking close to that little crosshair marking, positioning marking I've made on my fabric, I'm going to go ahead and drop my needle down, and I can see I'm not exactly where I want to be. So now I can bring my needle up, and I can use my movement tools to hone in 1 or 2 more ticks either direction and stab it again. So now I need to use my needle keys. That is right precisely where I want to be. So by using your needle up down button, by stabbing that crosshair, it gives you the ability to really precisely get yourself in position and check that you are there right exactly where you want to be. So if I'm doing a towel, let's talk about how I would get this design into position on a towel. Okay, so now I want to show you a second example of positioning. So if I'm doing a towel, I'm going to have, again, the bulk of my towel off to the left and the short side of my towel, the bottom of the towel here inside the neck of the machine, which means I need to rotate my design. So here we are on the formatting page. When I'm on this formatting page, I can go ahead and select rotate to get my bunny to where her feet are over on this end and her ears are over on the other end. So she's aimed in the same direction that she needs to be to go on the towel. So once I'm there, I can go ahead and select OK to get out of rotate. It's nice that rotate is there in our formatting screen for us. Now down here, we have, once again, our trial key. When I select the trial key, I do have those 9 points of positioning. And this time, instead of positioning off of the dead center of the design, again, that's where the crosshair is indicated on the design, I want to position based off of where the feet of the design are. And why do I want to do that? Well, if we take a close look at this stabilizer, this would be the base band of the towel. And from that band, I've got my vertical center of my towel. I like to have my design sitting about 1 inch away from the band of the towel. So I don't know where the center of the design is on this space. The only thing I'm worried about is that the bottom of the design is positioned 1 inch up from the band on the towel. So how do I get that into position? I'm going to start by going again to my trial key and selecting the bottom center. So now that I'm there, I can go ahead and select OK to get out of this tool. Now I need to move the design until the needle is right at that spot, 1 inch up from the bottom and at the exact vertical center of my towel. Once again, how do I check it? Well, I'm going to stab it. And I can see I'm not exactly where I need to be, maybe 3 ticks up and 3 ticks to the right. Stab it. Yes, that is in the dead center of where I want to be. So once again, if I look at the screen here, by using the bottom of the design as my positioning foundation, it allows me to get the design closer into where I want it to be. One thing to also check there, again, go back to your trial key, it allows you to check the bottom left-hand corner of the design so you can make sure you're not wibbling on an angle on that band. And then if I want to check the bottom right-hand corner, I can select this. I'm watching the crosshair move on the screen, but at this point, I'm also looking at my hoop to make sure that my design hasn't shifted out of position in rotation. And if it has, then I can make adjustments in my rotation section there on my formatting page. Pretty cool that we have the ability to position our design dependent upon the type of object that we're going to be embroidering. Am I above a pocket? Am I on the bottom of a towel? Whatever you need to do, you have different positioning tools that'll allow you to get there. One of the most awesome features on the BabyLock Vesta is the fact that it has a color sort option. So how is that valuable and how is it important? Well, let's say I was doing 3 American flags. I wouldn't want to stitch the first flag, the second flag, and then the third flag because I'm going to be changing my colors a million times and wasting all kinds of thread in order to do that. So if I'm doing 3 American flags, I'm going to want to do all of the red, all of the white, all of the blue. So let me just demonstrate to you how that color sort works. So first of all, right now I just have that one bunny on the screen. So I'm going to return to the previous screen and add from my designs a second bunny. Okay, I'm going to move that bunny about 1.5 inches up from center. And I'm going to select the second bunny and move her about 1.5 inches below center. So now I'm getting my 2 bunnies in position. There we are. Okay, so I've got my 2 bunnies and I've gone to edit end and here I am on my formatting screen. So right here we have a spool, a second spool, and a third spool, red, white, blue. Essentially, this would be where I can color sort. So again, let me explain that a little bit. Instead of doing all of the red, one red, one white, one blue, and then another red, another white, another blue. If I want to take care of all 3 reds at one time, this is how I do it. So I'm going to select this icon right here. Now, when I select embroidery, what you'll see is that I have 2 ginger jars, which is the first color in the design. Then I have 2 whites, which is the second color in the design. So very quickly and very easily, the machine has put the 2 colors together. I get asked a lot, well, does that mean you can do that in one design? No. So if we take the example of my eye, I have the whites of my eye, I have my little hazel, and then I have my black pupil, and then I have a little white sparkle on top of my black pupil because I am full of mischievousness. I don't want to stitch all of the white in one shot, and then my green, and then my black pupil, because now my black pupil has stitched over my white sparkle. So sometimes within a design, you'll see the same color repeated later on in the design. Sometimes it is created that way because that white sparkle needs to stitch on top of the black pupil. So this color sorting feature is really valuable only in terms of doing the same design a number of times. So again, think in your head, 3 American flags. I want to do all of my red, all of my white, all of my blue. I hope that makes sense for you. All right, we're ready to proceed right on into our final screen, our embroidery screen. So start by selecting embroidery. So once I'm here in embroidery, I just want to go over the information that's contained on this screen. So in the top left-hand corner, it's reminding me that I need to have on my U foot, which is my embroidery foot. It's showing me here that I've got 7,371 stitches in this design, and I have completed 0 of those stitches. This design is going to take me about 22 minutes to stitch out, and I have completed 0 of those minutes of stitching time. This design has 10 colors in it, and I have completed 0 of those colors. All right, so below that top banner, we can see here the first 4 colors in our design. So ginger jar, I can see here in my little preview, is the first color in the design. It's her little ears and the bottoms of her feet. Then I have white, I have deep rose, and I have white again. So this is showing me my first 4 colors. Here on the right end of that little line is the approximate minutes it takes for each of those colors. So you've got that. And I do say approximate because if you're doing a design that has an applique, it might be a quick sweep around that takes no more than 15 seconds. However, the machine doesn't give us to the second. It gives us to the minute. So it's approximately 1 minute, approximately 9 minutes, etc. Okay, so again, this little window right here is showing you the color that you are about to stitch. So my first color is ginger jar, and this is what I'm about to stitch. It's going to stay on that color until that particular color finishes. And then the next color will pop itself into that little box so you can see where you're going to stitch, and the screen will move up so that white is on top, and now you can also see what you're going to stitch. Now, here in the bottom right hand corner are 2 buttons I want to make sure we go over. So this first one right here, when I select that, this allows me to modify the tension in my embroidery bobbin area. This is not something that I do hardly at all ever. If my bobbin thread is pulling up, there are some different things I can do to achieve fixing that. And actually, your manual has a whole troubleshooting section because it's not just one cause and solution. There might be several different causes and several different solutions. This might be one of them, but again, refer to your manual as to how to fix that issue. Secondly, down here, I can turn off my cutting of my jump stitches. So what is a jump stitch? A jump stitch might be like if I was doing lettering. Some machines, depending on how small that lettering is, Kathryn, from the K to the A, it'll leave behind that movement stitch that happens when it ends K and starts A. So the BabyLock Vesta, thank the Lord in heaven, will actually trim those jump cuts between letters if it feels it's appropriate. If I've gotten too small and I'm in too small of an area, sometimes the machine doesn't cut the jumps that it feels will be problematic, that will pull out if it's too small an area. So right here, you can turn off your cutting, but I'm thankful that this machine cuts at all. So I don't think I've ever in 10 years turned off my cutting. If you feel it's appropriate for the project you're working on, please feel free to just select the icon and it will turn off that cutting. To turn it back on, you'll reselect it. You can also indicate the amount of millimeters in which you can make those changes. Again, you're getting into fine nuancy stuff, and if you start to do that kind of thing, go ahead and refer to your manual just to make sure you're making the proper adjustments. Okay, gets us out of here. This icon here, however, this is my favorite icon on the machine. I sometimes run into problems where my thread might break or my needle might break. It happens to all of us. Don't panic when those things happen because this is how we fix it. So let's just pretend I'm in the middle of my 3rd color of the design and my thread breaks. So I'm going to select this key. I'm going to advance. So see here, it shows that I'm on color number 3 and I'm somewhere in the middle of that design and oh no, my thread just broke. So you've gone along stitching, all of a sudden your thread breaks and you're in trauma. What happens is the machine is going so fast, it's usually going to proceed beyond where you had your problem. So all you need to do is rethread. So once you've rethreaded, how do I back up to get to where I'm just barely overlapping the last of what was perfect so that I can pick up from there and then recreate the rest of the design. So you will select your needle plus minus key. And once you do that, this will let you back up by individual stitches, by 10 stitches, by 100 stitches, or by an entire color. Or you could even advance by individual stitches, 10s, 100s, or a whole color. So if I need to back up to make sure I'm in the right place, I usually do about 10 to 20 stitches. So I do -10, and then I actually look at my hoop and where my needle is hovering and make sure that it's hovering exactly over where I want it to be, so I can pick up a little bit over where I had my problem so it can smooth out that problem. So this is where you can go to back up individual stitches or go forward individual stitches. Or let's say there's a circumstance. One time I was doing a design, it was a reindeer applique and he was a brown body with white felt in the background. So here's my white felt, here's my brown body. Okay, the ear on the design was thread. So when the brown thread was stitching over the brown fabric, it wasn't an issue. But as soon as the brown thread went up into that white felt, my little ear became see-through. So I was looking at the design thinking, that doesn't look good. I don't want a see-through ear. I wanted to go back and repeat. Let's pretend it was color number 3. So if I look at this screen, I finished color number 3 the first time, and now this says color number 4. It's ready for color number 4. But I'm looking at color number 3 thinking, that doesn't look right. I want to repeat that color. So this is how we do that. We're going to, again, select our stitches made by a needle. There are less or more of them. So I can select that icon and I can touch my minus spool, and I'm going to go from spool number 4, color number 4, negative spool, takes me back to color number 3. So you'll say, okay, to get out of there, then you can put your foot down and stitch color number 3 again, and then you won't have a see-through ear. So this particular section lets you go backwards and forwards by stitches or by whole entire colors, allowing you to really get that perfect level of precision within your design that you're looking for. If you want to go back to the very beginning because you were just checking something, you can select this 0 stitches stitched, and that takes you back to the very beginning. Okay gets us out of this screen, and that's the last thing to talk about. Well, that wraps it up. I hope you've learned a lot about your brand new BabyLock Vesta. If you don't actually have one of these yet, please come on down and visit us either here at the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore in Maitland, Florida, or up in our Villages location, the Sewing Studio at Lady Lake. And you know what? We also have this machine available online. If you visit our website at www.sewing.net, we've got them there as well, and we ship. Yay! So please, please, please take this beautiful machine and all of the knowledge that you just got and go and sew. Thank you.